and we have it currently scheduled for Saturday, September the 10th at the fire station. So we would love to have you all come out and be involved in all these events with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Forest Shade?
I'll let y'all look at these pictures, pass them down. I think I've used the right protocol. I've been in touch with the city a couple of times. A lady's been out to look a couple of times. And the idea, I think, is to send the owner or whoever owns whatever the place is and make them aware that this is not acceptable. And I think she said something about if they don't comply, the city sends somebody out there to do it and then bills them. I'm not sure, but anyway, we've got a pretty sad situation over here on Comanche. That place looks like it belongs in Haiti or Somalia, not Robinson, Texas. The place has got about 2.5 feet tall weeds. Looks like it hadn't been mowed in about 4 months. They left a big bag of garbage out in the front yard for, what was it, Wes, 2 weeks? At least 2 weeks. There's a water bottle in their yard that's been there. They parked their car on the grass in the yard. Now, I don't know if there's a city ordinance against that or not. Is there?
Yes.
Yes, sir. You can answer
Okay.
questions.
The thing is, I mean, there's some pretty expensive houses in my neighborhood. As a matter of fact, the guy across the street from this, well, I'm across the street, but the other street, is trying to sell his house. And I was over talking to him, and I asked him to call the city and register a complaint. That's not going to do anything but drive the value of our house down. Okay? So there's a blue tarpaulin. You can see it in one of those pictures. It's been out there for, I don't know, 6 months. The people that own the house didn't do anything hardly to the house either, by the way. There's a tree in the middle of there. They've got a big shrub area, circular shrub area. You can see where the tree branch has been there. It's been down there for probably a month. It looks to me like they have not done anything to improve the outside. Now, the house, as I understand it, was in really bad condition. I think it was put up for auction or something, and then I talked to some guy in Fort Worth, and he was gonna come down and do all this stuff and redo it and sell it. I haven't seen him since. So, I'm not sure what the situation out there is. They've got 3 or 4 cars there. So I don't know how many people's living in a house at all. So at any rate, I'm asking the city to please take care of this. Will you take care of this for us?
We will pass this on to the city manager, and he will get with the code
Is-
appliance. We can't answer and talk with you right now, being a public comment, but we can tell you the direction that we'll give is Mr. Lemon
So
will have
should
this
I go to
information.
the city manager?
Well, and
You're speaking to him right here.
And I think,
Oh,
I think,
I'm sorry.
I think code enforcement is already working on this.
Yes.
Yeah, they're already working on this property. It's not an overnight situation though. It takes a while. Has to go, you potentially have to go to court and do some other things, but code enforcement is working on this property. It just doesn't happen as quick as you'd like it to, unfortunately.
So when can we expect something to be done?
It will depend on the property owner and ultimately what the court decides. And ultimately, if nothing is done, then we will have to go in there and do it and put a lien on the property. But
Well,
that's typically,
After
That costs
4
the
months, it's
taxpayers.
obviously nothing's gonna get done out there at that place, except by the city.
right, but we have to go through the legal process.
Well, are you going through that now?
Yes, we're working on that now, so.
Okay, did I cover it all, guys? Thank you for your attention.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you, Forrest.
Anyone else have any citizens' comments at this time? We'll move to item 6, which is presentations. We have 3 presentations tonight, the Public Service Recognition Week, the National Police Memorial Week, and the National Public Works Week. That first week being now is going to be the Public Service Recognition Week. So I want to read a proclamation. We have done this now for how long? We know?
A long time.
It comes up every year. I guess.
It comes up every year.
All right, so whereas public service is among the most noble, and demanding of professions and excellence in the delivery of public service, helps to keep Robinson strong and prosperous and a wonderful place in which to live and work. And whereas Robinson City employees, through their commitment to excellence and diversity of skills, have made great contributions to the city of Robinson by preserving public safety and the health of our citizens, protecting our economic well-being by keeping a close eye on the financial resources of the city, maintaining our streets, parks, and other infrastructure, administering justice, providing excellent communication and education to our citizens, and handling a host of other essential duties the public entrusts to them. And whereas the city of Robinson recognizes the contributions made by public employees at all levels of city government and finds it fitting to set aside a special time to honor and thank these dedicated individuals who perform such vital roles. Now therefore, I, Bert Eckerling, Mayor of the City of Robinson, Texas, do hereby recognize May 1st through the 7th, 2022 as Public Service Recognition Week, and I urge all citizens to recognize the accomplishments and contributions of city employees and to observe this week by expressing their gratitude and appreciation to these dedicated public servants for the service they provide to our community every day. Who's here too, except for David here?
We've got several employees.
Yeah, let's bring
Come
them
on
up.
guys. Come on. They're all hiding back there. I'll look at the hide.
Turn around with this way, she's gonna want a picture. Okay, our second presentation is the National Police Memorial Week. Get feedback on the live there? All right, whereas the Congress and President of the United States have designated May 15th as Peace Officers Memorial Day and the week in which it falls as National Police Memorial Week, and whereas the members of the Robinson Police Department play an essential role in safeguarding the rights and freedoms of the citizens of Robinson, and whereas we honor the heroism of all of our law enforcement officers, especially those who have given their lives so that others might live, asking God's blessing for the families and friends they left behind. And whereas across the nation, Police Week is observed with ceremonies including the hanging of a blue bow or ribbon to honor law enforcement officers who have sacrificed their lives in the line of duty and to honor those who still strive to keep us safe. Now therefore, I, Bert Eckerling, Mayor of the City of Robinson, Texas, do hereby proclaim May 15th, 2022 as Peace Officer Memorial Day and May 11th through the 17th, 2022 as National Police Memorial Week in Robinson, Texas, and encourage all citizens to express their deep appreciation to the men and women who risk their lives to guard and protect us. Come on, Tracy, get back here too.
Oh, he's gonna pretend like he can't hear you.
Come on, Tracy. He's wearing a badge. He gets his picture. All right, and lastly, we have National Public Works Week. Whereas the public works services provided in our community are an integral part of our citizens' everyday lives, the health, safety, and comfort of this community greatly depends on these facilities and services. Whereas without the dedicated efforts of public works professionals, engineers, and administrators who are responsible for building, operating, and maintaining the public works system and programs such as water, sewer, streets, and highways, public buildings, and solid waste collection, these services could not be provided. Whereas the support of an understanding and informed community is vital to the efficient operation of public works programs, and the efficiency of the qualified and dedicated staff is materially influenced by the people. And whereas this year's theme is Ready and Resilient, which showcases the role public works plays in creating a great place to live. Public works provides togetherness and helps maintain a community strength by working with its citizens and public works professionals. Now therefore I, Bert Echterling, Mayor of the City of Robinson, Texas, do hereby recognize May 15th through the 21st, 2022 as Public Works Week in the City of Robinson, Texas, and I urge all citizens to acquaint yourselves with the issues involved in providing our public works and to recognize the valuable contributions these public works professionals make every day to our health, safety, comfort, and quality of life. They're all working.
No, they get to come up again.
Come back again.
You guys get double recognized now.
Some of us are double the size.
Here you go. You come this way. We're gonna wait. Won't be the same picture. There you go.
Oh, looks completely different now.
Thank you.
You need to take this one with you.
Good job, Bert. It's more reading than I've done in a while.
You did good. You got warmed up on the third one.
All right, item 7 is present quarterly investment report. Mr. Levin.
So this is the presentation of the quarterly investment report for the quarter that ended March 31st, 2022. The book value and market value at the beginning of the quarter was $30,569,048. The book value and market value at the end of the quarter was $33,338,749. The increase is mostly attributed to ad valorem revenues that come in January and February and then are spent out throughout the year. The average quarterly yield is 0.43%. The rolling 3-month treasury is 0.31%. The rolling 6-month treasury is 0.36%. Taxable is 0.15%. So we did outperform each of those a little bit. The average quarter end yield is also 0.43% in the rolling 3-month treasury for year to date. And the average rolling 3-month treasury for year to date is 0.18%, and the rolling 6-month treasury for that period is 0.22%, taxable is 0.1%. And quarterly interest earnings for this quarter is $33,881, and fiscal year to date interest is $64,722. I'd be happy to answer any questions about any of the report if you have.
Council, have any questions for Mr. Levin?
I don't. No questions.
Thank you for that report. Moving to consent agenda items 8 and 9. Council had a chance to review those. Any questions? Motions?
Motion to approve consent agenda items. I'll second.
Motion is to approve the consent agenda. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 10 is a public hearing. Conduct a public hearing considering possible action on ordinance 2022-014. Yeah,
Skip.
what I skip?
9.
9.
No, it's a consent agenda.
No, it was consent.
8 and 9 with consent
Yeah.
agenda. All right.
Then you're fine. You're fine.
You just voted on it. We good?
We're good.
All right. Item 10, conduct a public hearing considering possible action on ordinance 2022-014 regarding the application of Kevin Vanderwood on behalf of Stacy Fidal Coker, et al. For approval of a zoning change from RO District to C2 District On 6.4, 6.8 acres known as 2 tracks out of the CO Chemical Survey, approximately addressed at 4850 South Loop 340 Highway. Public hearing opens at 6:20 with presentation from Mr. French.
That pause threw me off. You paused and threw me off.
Justin, that mic is on.
Okay.
I just had his mad. I was like, yeah,
Were you able to find the PowerPoint presentation? It's on the council.
This conference is no longer being recorded.
oh, thank God, I feel the pressure lifted.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council members. The subject site is located on South Loop 340. The property is currently zoned Retail Office District, and the requested zoning is C2 District. This is the site that was previously before the council for rezoning to the Planned Development District with some deviations to our minimum standards. This request is not a planned development, so there's no development plan to discuss here. It's just a request to change to our straight C2 General Commercial District. The Planning and Zoning Commission, by a vote of 7 in favor, none opposed, recommends approval. There were notices
This
sent to all property
conference will
owners
now be
within
recorded.
200 feet of the site, and no notices were returned in favor, none returned in opposition, and none returned to sender. The subject site is highlighted here, and it's like it's not going to let me change the slide. Do you want to go to the next one? The requested C2 zoning is consistent with our future land use map, which designates the entire frontage along South Loop 340 as a commercial land use category. The site does back up to residential in this area. Next slide, please. And our zoning map, the subject site is showing the RO Retail Office District here. There is some C2 currently on South Loop 340. That would be this property here, which was the rezoning for the shooting range. And then this property here, which was the rezoning for the annual bloomer. Then we also have industrial here at Dayton. The medium red here is C1 Commercial District. So with that, I'll conclude my presentation and be available to answer any questions of the council.
We have the applicant here.
Yes.
Any here? Do you have anything to add at this time?
Not really. We've had listed for maybe 2 years now, representing the owners on it. We've had some interest in it. As y'all know, Rental One tried to go into the space, but none of the people who have shown interest, their uses don't fit the current zoning of retail office. So all interest has either been for industrial or commercial, and we chose to go with commercial as that kind of, I guess, less noise or site nuisance for the residential area behind it as compared to industrial. The other retail office in the area, I don't think any of those are actually operating as retail office. Most, like Leggett Trailers is right next to it. They're mainly storage yards. We've had people that want to do that as well, but we feel like the C2 would be best for the area and for the city. So. Any questions?
No, no, no.
Good for now.
Okay.
Thanks.
We have anybody in the audience that'd like to speak on this item? For or against? All right, we'll close the public hearing at 6:24. Mr. French, you might have said it, I might have missed it. Did you say P and Z voted 7-0 in favor and anything returned?
No notice was returned in P&Z's results correct.
Council questions? Comments?
No, I'd like to make a motion.
I have a question actually from first. So what's the difference between doing it this way versus previous zoning request was for a PD in that space. What are the advantages, what are the disadvantages of doing it outright C2 zoning ahead of a project?
Sure, so with the previous rezoning to the PD district, the PD district allows some flexibility to meeting our design criteria. If you recall, with the Rental One development plan, they had some deviations that they were requesting in regards to having gravel for some of their maneuvering area for their heavy machinery that they would have there stored for sales and rental. And they did request some variance to the landscape requirements, as I recall, and the fencing standards.
So doing it to C2, Rental One could come back into the same space. Would that be a business allowed in C2?
The C2 zoning would require, would allow for office, warehouse, or showroom, but no exterior storage. Any kind of exterior storage of like heavy machinery or equipment would require a specific use permit in addition to the specific, the C2 zoning. So that specific use permit would have to come up later to P&Z City Council for consideration.
My concern for switching to C2 now, and I'm not saying I'm against it, but my concern is that with PDs we have a lot of input and a lot of ability to control, especially that this butting up to a neighborhood. And would we lose a little bit of that? Or in this zoning, would that be something that would be?
I mean, the ordinance has requirements. Usually like for the last example, the reason they went planned development was there were several things in the ordinance they didn't want to comply with, such as the screening requirements and things like that. So they were wanting to get an exception on that, and I think that was part of what the objection to that zoning was. But there is screening requirements and all those things are in the ordinance. And as Mr. Prince said, if they want to do something like an equipment yard or something like that, it would require an SUP. So
Yeah, what Rental One didn't fit any of the C2.
Yeah.
So
I'm just trying to think of what other businesses of that type, because again, we're butting up to a residential neighborhood, and I want development on this thing. I want this thing filled in just like everybody else, but also this one being right up next to a neighborhood. I just want to make sure we have the ability to protect that and buffer that a little bit, and then also the abandoned right of way. Is that something that, I don't know, have we had any
That's something
discussions
that'll have to be done
with property owner now, and perhaps
and that's
go
something
ahead
that would
and
have to be done through plating to claim that. So
and plating wouldn't happen until after there's a project under
yeah, until
development.
somebody comes along and wants to develop the property.
So, okay, anyway, I was just thinking, ahead of this, why can't we just get with current owner but that would require expensive plating, so, okay. That's all the questions I have.
Mr. Holland?
So we have C1, C2, C3, right? Which one's more?
1 and 2.
1 and 2? Which one's more heavier commercial related?
So we have retail office district, which is our most restrictive, least intensive. That's what the property is currently zoned today. Then we have C1, which is light commercial, it's in the middle, and C2, which is general commercial, and it's our least restrictive and most intensive of the 3 commercial districts. And then we also have the industrial district, which is more inclusive than the C2 district.
So this is kind of the middle of the road then, industrial being the heaviest, retail being the lightest. This is kind of catch-all in the middle, right?
And even though it's zoned retail office, we have a lot of uses that are currently consistent with C2. We have, I think, overhead doors still there. We have the van, the handicap van reconversion business that opened there.
Shooting range.
And some of that. So those are technically right now, well, the shooting range is rezoned, but some of the others are non-conforming. So most of the uses up there are probably closer to C2 than they are to retail office.
Yeah, a lot of times when we look at our map here and we look at retail office, that is a really new map from what was adopted 16, 17, 18, re-adopted. So I think that's probably by default used to be C1.
It was probably
I didn't see 2 or 3.
yeah, based on the uses up there.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the zoning change
Okay.
from the RO district to the C2 district, known as 2 tracks on the CO campus on Loop 340.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion to approve ordinance 2022-014. Mr. Burke, do you have any questions or comments?
No, sir.
No?
None.
Mr. Dennis? Anything else? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Mr. Rogers? Correct.
That's correct.
Motion carries. All right, item 10 is conduct a public hearing, consider possible action on ordinance 2022-015 regarding the application of, I was going to mess this up.
Yep, you're on.
Excuse me? Item 11?
Yes.
Ordinance 2022-015 regarding the application of Salim Karo. Okay. For a zoning change from RO Office District to MH HUD Code Manufactured Housing District on 3.08 acres, known as a Lot 1, Block 1 of the Robinson DTP V3 LLC addition, approximately addressed at 296 North Robinson Drive. We'll open a public hearing at 6:32 with Mr. French.
Mayor, Council, this subject site is located behind the Dollar General off of Highway 77. Majority of the site to the north is located in the FEMA designated floodplain, but there is some developable area on the southern end of the site. The applicant tells me that the access to the site is provided through the Dollar General drive approach on Highway 77, where there's a access easement. And go to the next slide, please. This is showing the latest and greatest information from the FEMA floodplain mapping. The hatched area is the floodway, and then the outer area in purple is the 100-year floodplain. And you can see the subject site is this area here. This is the Dollar General that the site is looking behind. Go to the next slide, please. And our current future land use map identifies the northern area that's in the 100-year floodplain as institutional and open space, and that's because of the floodplain. And then the southern area to be in the commercial land use category, along with the other properties that have access up of Highway 77. Next slide, please. The subject site is zoned retail office district, which is the same zoning as the Dollar General and properties to the north and west. You may recall the property to the south was just recently rezoned from C1 district to C2 district on the back half. And that property owner actually came to the Planning and Zoning Commission and is in opposition of this request. On April 7th, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended denial of the request by a vote of 6 in favor, none opposed, and 1 abstaining. The request is to the MH HUD Code Manufactured Housing District. That's the only zoning district in today's zoning ordinance that allows for an RV park. With that being said, and with the MH, Manufactured Housing District, being a residential district, it's not consistent with our future land use map in the comprehensive plan, which calls for a commercial land use on this subject site. There is the drafted zoning, drafted ordinance amending the zoning ordinance where we're looking at relocating the RV park land use out of the, or not really out of, but well, yes, I think it is coming out of the manufactured housing district and putting it in the C2 district with an SUP approval requirement. And so RV parks are intended for temporary lodging, similar to a hotel, for example. And therefore, it's more of a commercial use than a residential use. So that's why the proposed ordinance that's being discussed later on tonight's agenda is, as it has been drafted, to require RV parks in the C2 district with SUP approval. So, let's see. I think I touched on all my aspects. So if there's any questions for me, I'll be available for the council.
The applicant wanted having to add this time.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Heini Tomei. I'm with Golden Triangle Consulting Engineers, and I'm representing Mr. Salim, the owner of the property tonight. First of all, let me say this. I worked as a public servant in municipalities for 15 years of my life and my career, and hats off to y'all for recognizing those who protect and those who serve, because I've always said everybody working for a city becomes an emergency responder immediately, whether in the utilities department, public works, or parks, because when you have an emergency, they all have to respond. As far as this project is related, the location of this property, first of all, makes it very difficult to develop anything in it that can abide by the existing zoning, as well as the zoning that is proposed in your comprehensive plan. The second challenge we have with this property is the topography. Like Mr. French said, a good section of it is in the 100-year flood zone, and to be able to build any permanent structures there, such as office spaces or retail or anything that can be sustained, will require some major retaining walls and some major elevation of the property, which will make it very economically not feasible. So it's one of these properties that is very difficult to fit in these zones that you all want it to fit in, and the only use we could find for it was something like for recreational vehicles, because there will be no permanent structures. If there's any issues, these vehicles can be relocated. We tried several other options. We even tried like a car wash. We did feasibility studies, business models. There is no visibility from the highway, which makes it very, very difficult for running any type of business. And I do understand that if the zoning changes to C2, we will be able to come back and try to amend this one more time with a specific use permit, and it will fit a little bit better in that zoning than what we have today. But if that gets accepted, then we have to come back one more time. The facility we're trying to build is going to be all reinforced concrete foundations, roads, pads. It will be fenced, it will be secured with cameras, it will be man/woman 24 hours a day. We're not building a junky RV park. We are building something that the owner is proud of, and this is what he does for a living. He's developing different properties in different areas, and we have another project close by to Waco, which is way bigger than this one, but understand the votes that came through, and understand where you stand as well. Like I said, being on both sides of this desk, but if you all can consider that, it'll be highly appreciated. And if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak on this item at this time? Step.
Hi, my name is Celine Kropp. I'm the property owner. I'm a commercial real estate developer and investor. I bought this property a little over 4 years ago without any plans. I just wanted to buy the land as an investment. But later I changed my mind because I see the potential in this neighborhood, and I decided to build something on it and start working with Dr. Haney to see what potential developments we could do on this property. As he mentioned, we looked at retail shops, car washes, many other different potential developments on this property, but just as he mentioned, nothing was working on it. If any plan was working business-wise, development costs were so high, so it didn't make sense anyways. And then I came up with the idea of RV parks as RV resorts, where people can live in their RVs. Some of them maybe will stay 6 months, a year. Some of them are going to stay maybe a month. And after our engineering, we did some renderings. So this is the real property design that we're planning to build. So this is the idea we have for this property right now. All right, that's all I would like to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak on this item? Maybe not, please.
Thank you. We are the property owners directly to the south, as well as the property owners across the street. We've seen deja vu to be fighting this RV battle constantly along our commercial corridor. I suggest, just as planning and zoning declined the request 7-0 or 6-0, I encourage you guys to do the same thing. This is not a good use of the property. We're not here to give an inferior use to somebody who bought a tract of land that was probably not to be bought. I mean, the mistake was when Family Dollar carved this up and left it back out. Oh, nothing. So it's hard use. This is a tough property to do anything on. I agree with that. Shouldn't have bought it. But that's not a reason for us to put an RV park in our commercial corridor. I'm a neighbor. I don't want that next to me. I don't want the result coming from an RV park next to what we're doing next door. We got plans to build a lot of stuff and spend a lot of money, and that's an eyesore that I don't want to be next to. So I encourage us to decline it, just as P&Z did, just as we've all declined it and multiple attempts to put RV parks on our corridor of 77. Not a great use, not the highest and best use. I appreciate out-of-towners wanting to come here and invest money. That's wonderful, but let's do it conforming. Let's bring something attractive, something that we can use, something that's not silly. That's where we're going to go. We don't want this here. So I encourage us to decline the request with a majority. Thank you.
Mayor, can you have him state his name and address?
Yes, could you step up, put your name and address to that, please?
David Brennan, address would be 200 North Robinson Drive and 100 North Robinson Drive. Or Bill and Dixie over there on Christie.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak on this item? We'll close the public hearing at 6:44. Council have any questions for Mr. French, Mr. Burnett, or in general? Mr. Jennings?
Mr. French, what was the P&Z vote?
6-0. One
6-0
Okay.
for denial.
Thank you.
So this request would require a supermajority vote from City Council to approve.
Mr. Burks?
Nothing too major. I mean, I was really interested about the drive approach. Y'all said it shared the same easement as the dollar store currently. Okay, I just wanted to clarify on that, just to make sure I heard correctly. So,
Ms. McLean? Mr. Tyler? Mr. Holland? Mr. Rogers?
I have none.
Open for motion.
I'll make a motion to deny ordinance 2022-015.
I second.
All right, the motion is to deny ordinance 2022-015. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, moving to the next public hearing. Conduct a public hearing, consider possible action on ordinance 2022-016 regarding the application of Kapil Basal on behalf of J. Kalamia LLC, represented by Bakish Bandari, for approval of a specific use permit for a convenience store with gas pumps in the C1 district on .773 of an acre, being portions of lots 2 and 4, block 15 of the original town of Robinsonville addition, addressed at 310 South Robinson Drive. Public hearing opens at 6:46. Again, Mr. French.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. This request, with this request, we sent notices to all property owners within 200 feet of the site, and no notices were returned in support or opposition, and no notices were returned to sender. On April 21st, 2022, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommends approval by a vote of 6 in favor, none opposed. This specific use permit is accompanied with a site plan, and the subject site is located here along Highway 77 at East Tate, and this is Lindell Drive. Could you go to the next slide, please? The site is located within the city's mixed-use land use category on the future land use map. That's identifying the city's center area as a future mix of uses that encourage clustered developments and a pedestrian walkability. Next slide, please. The subject site, along with other properties on this east side of Highway 77, are currently zoned C1 district, and the property across the street, across the highway, is also zoned C1 district in this red color here. Let's see, next slide, please. Here are some photos of the subject site in the current conditions, which include some dilapidated driving area and parking facilities, a non-conforming drive approach along Highway 77, a lack of landscaping, gravel area around the back of the building, screening fence of approximately 7-foot metal paneling on a portion of the east property line, and then chain link fence with various vegetation on other portions of that east property line. Let's see. The dumpster is currently located in the back of the property, and along the north property line is another chain link fence with some vegetation there. Next slide, please. This is also looking at that north property line where the site abuts the Little Rocket Daycare. It's the site this image is from Highway 77, and this is also looking at the north side of the building. And then we have an image of the front of the building and an image of the back of the building. The building on the north, west, and south sides has this overhang with some underlighting, fluorescent underlighting here to illuminate the exterior of the building. And then on the back of the building, there is a couple wall-mounted exterior lights. And then there's also a pole in the back of the property with a floodlight. Next slide, please. So this is the, I didn't update it. I apologize. In your packet, you should have received the applicant site plan. Sorry, I didn't make my presentation. Or did it? Yes, I'm sorry. It's still there. The next one, I think, had it. Oh, no, okay. So, well, that
Much
yeah,
closer.
It's closer, yeah. Maybe I'll find it in the packet. Should be the last document. There we go. Yeah, so this is the applicant site plan where he's indicating to improve the pavement area, improve the landscaping. He's going to comply with the TxDOT drive approach in regards to reducing this drive approach and providing some pervious area along a lot of that frontage. And then this is even showing some shrubs along that new pervious surface, which would have to be planted on the private property side of that property's frontage. Additional trees planted along the north and east side of the property, and the dumpster will be relocated to this location on the south end of the property with the proper screening device. So the history on the property is that this is previously a Texaco convenience store with gasoline sales. It was a non-conforming use. It's been vacant for quite some time, over 6 months, and it lost its grandfathering. And so they're requesting to come into conformance with our zoning ordinance by requesting approval of this specific use permit. And I'd be happy to answer any questions of the council.
Thank you, Mr. French. You have anything you'd like to add at this time? The applicant?
No, but I'm Lucas Bundari, and I'm going to do whatever I can, whatever the council will have approved with the site plan. So as soon as we get it done from you guys, so if you have any question, I can answer it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I'll ask that question here. Anyone else like to speak on this item, for or against? We'll close public hearing at 6:52. You say Mukesh Bhandari?
Yeah.
And you say you are representing?
Actually, Kapil Bashir, he's right here. I'm the landlord, I'm the property owner.
Okay.
And he's running the store. The last time he was in his active duty service, so I represent him because he wasn't able to come here.
So who owns the dirt?
I own the property.
Okay. And he's looking at wanting to do the restaurant, the
he will
gas
be
station?
working for me, so he will
Convenience
be
store?
running the store.
Okay. Couple things.
Yes, sir.
Just from my point of view, this is a tough spot. This has been in and out of a gas station for years. Nothing has been able to fly. How are you going to make it fly?
I mean, I have experience for quite a while, so, you know, and I have all the new pumps, and, you know, I should be cheap. I will have all the cool beverages, hot coffee and everything nice, because I'm doing this for 11 years now. I've been managing the store for 14 years. I have my first store, it's been like 9 years. So I have quite a few stores in the Dallas-Fort Metroplex. So I'll try my best to make it work. You know, the base is need to be clean, the inside should be clean, outside should be clean. All the stuff should be well stocked, good customer service, and I think that we'll try to grab our business.
Speaking of beverages, you are aware you cannot sell alcohol at that place being within X amount of feet of a daycare.
I didn't know that.
Can you confirm, Mr. French? Mr. Leon?
That is my understanding. And I see the city secretary's agreeing.
Okay.
Yeah, our ordinance prohibits it within 300 foot of a
That's a big one for
daycare
a store.
so, yeah.
I'm sorry?
That's a big one for a convenience store. And then, like Mr. French was saying, it's been vacant for 6 months. We're on a mission to try to clean up Highway 77. So, you know, seeing your site plan is good. But it does, since it was vacant, we are gonna be requiring all the updates for pavement and screening and whatnot as if it were in your store. With that, I'll divert my comments over to Mr. Jennings.
I'd like to see something developed on that, but I'm not looking for another convenience store gas station. We have two right in that area right now. One just brand new one built down the street. We have another one as you come in the town. And it's, to me, it's too many gas stations. I like to see maybe a restaurant or something like that that would help our city. But as far as the gas station, I'm dead against it. That's been vacant a long time. Don't know if those tanks have water leaks or anything like that, because it's been sitting more than 6 months. It's probably been sitting for 2 to 3 years. And that's my concern on that.
Regarding a tank test, I already have did it. I have compared with TCEQ, and I have done all the tests. And without the test, the TCEQ is not going to transfer the tank to my name. So it has already been done, and I have the report stating that there is no leak and the tank is in every good condition. I have the TCEQ doesn't let me register the tank under my corporation unless I do the test by the third party, the TCEQ third party. So I have done that, and I have all the permit and everything. The tank is in good conditions.
Thank you.
Mr. Burks?
My question is just more on the, like, appearance wise. So as Bert mentioned, just bringing the building up to code, y'all had plans already to make improvements. I mean, is that on y'all's list of items?
Yes, sir. I have all the vegetation, and on the East State Avenue, it will be hot and spot.
Okay.
Everything, there won't be any hole or anything on the parking lot. Everything will be cleaned up.
Okay, and then just the big one Bert mentioned, no alcoholic beverage sales, and that's going to impact some things. So, I mean, is with it, you not knowing that, I mean, was that kind of what you guys were chasing after, or is that?
I mean, I didn't know that until now. Honestly, I didn't know that until now. But you know, we're gonna have to do this now.
Okay. Other questions?
Yeah, I think the alcohol sale is a big one. As far as gas stations, there's up and down the road. I don't have any questions.
I echo a lot of the comments already made, but I would tell you an operating gas station looks better than a non-operating gas station, especially if it is going to have a lot of things to be upgraded to make it. You know, I think that this gentleman here is ready to make the improvements to that property and bring it up to current code, and as he described, a better looking property that exists there now. It's going to look better than it's sitting there for the next 3 years empty. That's my opinion on it. I'd make a motion to approve the application. Do I need to read the entire description?
Yes.
No.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'll second.
Who seconded?
Me.
Bert.
We do have a motion to approve ordinance 2022-016. Is there any further discussion? I only fear that this is going to get voted on and it may or may not pass, but how does alcohol sales or not being able to sell alcohol in that, how's that going to affect?
I mean, honestly, I didn't know that until you just said me.
Yeah, so we're probably up in the air even if it...
So, I mean, you know, because I already bought it and I already, you know, used all of the new pumps and everything. So, I mean, I'm all in.
Yeah.
So.
I second the motion strictly because it's already a gas station. If we're going to update it, then, I mean, you're the man to do it. You own it, it's already there. But it will fall into new and updated requirements as it's been vacant. But I just fear that, you know, obviously I want you to know, but as if I learned that you can't sell alcohol there, that you need to know.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm already in, so.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, any further discussion? The motion is to approve ordinance 2022-016. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Mr. Jannix and Mr. Stivner? Excuse me?
Yeah.
Yes. Jannix and Stivner?
Yes.
Nays. Rogers, Holland, Hectorling, McLean, Burks, Yates. Okay. Motion passes. Good luck to you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
It's got cigarettes and lotto tickets, so
Yeah.
something.
Find
Yeah.
some to make good tamales or something, a reason to go.
Or change the ordinance. All right, item 13, public hearing. Conduct a public hearing and consider approval of the request of Karen Sanchez for the variance to section 5.1B2B of the subdivision ordinance that requires lots using surface irrigation as the means of effluent disposal shall be a minimum of 2 acres, with the subject site being 0.54 of an acre, known as the tract in the CO Campo survey, addressed at 311 Wiggly Drive. Public hearing opens at 7 o'clock with Mr. French.
The subject site is located here at the end of, southern end of Wickley Drive. This is south of East Stegall Drive, and the site is approximately 2,400 feet from the nearest sanitary sewer main that's part of the city's sanitary sewer collection system. Next slide, please. This is the city's record map for the sanitary sewer system, which ends approximately here. This right here is a abandoned force main, so that doesn't count. That it needs to come from this location if it is going to be able to make it that direction. Next slide, please. And this request is before you because the existing subsurface soil absorption system has failed. It's been there for quite some time. The residence was built in 1984. The property is 0.54 of an acre. The city of Robinson requires a minimum of 2 acres for a surface irrigation system and a minimum of 1 acre for a subsurface soil absorption system, which has already failed on the property. And with the site constraints that the applicant's representative can explain, the applicant is proposing a surface irrigation system for the 0.54 acre site, which is allowed which is allowed by TCQ and the Waco-McClellan County Public Health District, because there's not a water well on the site. However, our Robinson subdivision ordinance, it does not comply with, so we're requesting a variance to that subdivision ordinance requirement for the minimum acreage of 2 acres and allowing it to be reduced down to 0.54 of an acre at the subject site. If you have any answering questions of the council.
We have anyone want to speak against this? We'll close the public hearing 7:03.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, certainly speak. We didn't have anybody against, so we don't need a public hearing, do we? All right, Ms. Sanchez, do you have anything you want to add? You a little backed up?
Yeah. No, I've lived at the house for 32 years, and when it rains heavily, all through the years, the water comes down the street to my backyard where the water lines are, and there's been a problem, but now it's just totally failed. And so I've had Luke Snyder with Jernan.
He's right behind you.
Yeah.
He snuck up on you.
I had him come out and do a site plan and our evaluation, and this is what he came up with. He recommended getting rid of 4 trees. I've got that out of the way so that there'll be more ground cover open for it to be absorbed from the sunshine to get it and all that stuff. So any technical questions, you can shoot it right to you. So.
I have a question for Mr. French. I believe we already did a variance to this on Wiggly 2-3 years ago. We had a system that failed and had to be replaced.
We did. If you go back a couple slides, please.
On the other side of the road.
Yeah, no, that's it. Yes, it's this property right here had a failed system, and it was granted a variance for a surface irrigation system. And then I believe the property at the corner already has a surface irrigation system.
Mr. Janice?
I may sound stupid, but what's the surface? What's
Spray,
the-
like a
Oh, the
septic
spray,
spray system.
okay.
You roll it.
Thank you.
Mr. Burks?
Good questions.
Ms. McLean?
None?
Mr. Fowler? Mr. Holland? Mr. Rogers?
I have no questions.
I only have one comment, that if, you'll, if I could have made it, you'd seen 3 of them on here, because, you know, when we wrote this ordinance, I was a huge proponent for subsurface distribution. Mr. Snyder installs for me, today, and has for a while. He does a very good job and knows his stuff. But,
Appreciate that.
there are going to be instances where obviously we can't do subsurface treatment, and we've got to spray. And obviously in this condition, I don't see any problems with Sanchez's location. So if there's no further comment, we'll open for a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the variance, section 5J B 2B for subdivision ordinance for surface irrigation at 311 Wiggly Drive.
I'll second.
All right, motion is to approve the variance for Mrs. Sanchez. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Now you don't have to live under a bridge.
All right, item 14, conduct a public hearing considering possible action on ordinance 2022-017, an ordinance amending the signed ordinance for the city of Robinson, Texas. We'll open at 7:07 with again Mr. French.
At the last council meeting, we had a discussion on an ordinance amending the sign ordinance for 2 things. One is to allow co-location of signs at unified developments, and then secondly, changing the regulations for electronic reader boards. So the ordinance before you now is an ordinance that would accomplish those 2 things. This is showing an example of a co-location sign. Oscar's Tires is not located on the same site as this sign structure, but Granger Auto Sales is. So this is an example of a unified development. It's under the same ownership, it's in the same addition, and the off-premises sign of Oscar's is going to come into conformance with this ordinance, whereas right now it's a legal non-conforming signage. Next slide. Okay. And this is the added language to accomplish what we're talking about here through our sign ordinance. Next slide. And next slide. And then the second purpose of this ordinance amendment, amending the sign ordinance, is to change the regulations for electronic reader boards. We actually have one that was recently denied at the new Bush's Chicken that's being constructed. This is the electronic reader board here. It has basically a video screen that changes images where they can change the messages easily on the signage. Next slide, next image. So the site of the Bush's Chicken is located in between a residence to the north and a residence to the south. Both of those residences are legal non-conforming uses in the C1 light commercial zoning district. Our ordinance today, go to the next slide please. Our ordinance today states that the electronic reader board cannot be within 100 feet of the property line of a residential dwelling. And so that prohibits Bush's Chicken and other properties in this, not meeting this criteria, from having a electronic reader board, even if it's on Highway 77. where we have several properties with electronic reader boards complying with this. But this is a unique site in that it's located in between two residential dwellings. So the proposed change would change the 100-foot distance requirement from residential dwellings to residential zoning districts. So the Bush's Chicken and other similar instances in the city that come up like this one can have an electronic reader board, and as long as they meet the other criteria in the sign ordinance. One of the concerns mentioned last time in our discussion was the illumination and brightness of electronic reader boards. And I found in our sign ordinance we have standards today that I feel comfortable with, and I feel protect us from the excessive illumination of electronic reader boards. And I have that located here. If you let me to read it or explain it. One of the things that we require with sign permits for electronic reader boards is a written statement from the sign the sign contractor that the sign will comply with these standards. So it must be controlled and equipped with a light sensing device that will automatically dim the intensity of the light emitted by the sign during ambient low light conditions and at night, so that the sign does not exceed the maximum brightness levels allowed in this section. So the technology is very smart and very intense in that it can sense the brightness outside, so that you can have a brighter sign during the day in bright sunlight. You can have a dimmer sign. A dimmer sign. Let's see. Yes.
Yeah. Brighter in the daylight.
evening.
Yeah,
Right.
evening. Yeah.
And so I think you understand that. City staff recommends approval of this ordinance, amending our sign ordinance in order to accomplish goals in our 2034 Community Visions Comprehensive Plan, such as reduce sign clutter, beautify the city, create impressive image corridors, and provide a transportation system that facilitates the movement of people and goods in a safe, efficient, and well-designed manner. Any questions from city staff on the building?
Thank you, Justin. Do we have anybody in the audience that'd like to speak on this item? Step on up, sir. State your name and address for us. What's that?
I said, not even come here for this.
Okay. Name and address for us, please. Name and address.
Matt Bach, 720 Rotoma Park. You guys say that you want to clean up Highway 77. We'll start with signs. Who wants an annoying electronic sign flashing at you as you're driving by? Obviously, the chicken place didn't do their homework, or they wouldn't have built that place in between two home residences, which I'm sure they're more annoyed than I am. But yeah, they should have done their homework. If you're not going to change the ordinance for the guy at the gas station wanting to sell beer near the child care, don't change it for this one. My 2 cents.
Thank you.
No, I hate those signs.
Anyone else like to speak on this item? Close at 7:13. Opening discussion. Questions for Mr. French? Council comments?
I don't have any. Not at the moment now.
You thought long and hard on it.
I know it.
I hate the sign too.
I got a question. This is a silly question though. So, I get the intent. I hate the songs too. I get the intent, right? To change the language to say next to whatever. I can't even think. Sorry. But in this one instance, have we reached out to the homeowner? Has the homeowner addressed anything? Is the homeowner aware? Just out of curiosity.
And nothing other than the notice of the agenda.
Because my whole thing is absolutely Highway 77 is supposed to be a corridor that allows businesses to thrive and grow. Unfortunately, these signs are just age of time, and that's what we have, and that's how they market and display information. So I get it. I mean, it's hard to find something if the neighbor that's next to this property, which this instance really protects us from something like that happening, because you're not going to see much of that happening anyway, in a residential district versus residential use in a commercial district. So I guess it's a question with no answer, so I can't do anything.
Mr. Mayor, may I jump in? I'm sorry, I didn't skip you one. So I'm all about protecting the residents, especially from business, and I have unique experience with this, working for a business next to a home. Even our parking lot lighting, which conforms to today's current code, is a nuisance on the neighbor. It's going to be one of those things that we will battle with every one of these properties converting over to commercial in the future. I don't necessarily think that there's great value in electronic boards from an operator standpoint, if you've got the extra money, I guess. But we're going to fight this. That there's going to be a constant battle between homes and these businesses up and down 77 as it changes over to commercial. There's not a lot we're going to do. I like the idea of the auto dimming. That helps. Definitely helps. I'm either way with the electronic signs. I think.
See, and I'm with you. If I would have had the neighbor here arguing.
And of course I'm neighbors with that neighbor too. I have not spoken to them. I don't know what their thoughts are.
This ordinance is not unique to that one property that was an example of the applicability of this ordinance, but it's citywide that this ordinance change would be applicable to. That's just one example. So there's not notices to individual property owners because it's not unique to that one property where the Bush's Chicken is located.
Do we know how many feet? So it's under 100 feet. Is it 50 feet, 75 feet? I'm horrible with measurements. Put a dollar sign in front of it. I'm good.
You might go back to the slides. There's one that shows the site plan.
That's close.
Nope, down. Right, look, up, right there. Yes. So I don't have the site frontage. I think is about 150 feet. But with the drive approach in the middle, the sign can be located here, or it could be located here. And either way, it's within 100 feet of the south property line and 100 feet of the north property line.
My thought would be, leave the ordinance as it is and let these businesses request a variance. But I almost would then fear that there would be opposition and they wouldn't be allowed by opposition, just if we're listening to the residents around them. But would this be something that could come to?
It would take an ordinance amendment. Our sign ordinance doesn't have a variance process. We took the sign ordinances out of the zoning ordinance.
Oh, that's right.
And by doing that, it took any zoning variance out of signage.
Everyone scratch my saying.
So I think it gets back to what do we as a council envision Highway 77?
I hate this topic.
Right.
I think the future says that it's probably a part of a business corridor. Even if I say it's not the smartest investment, you're not getting a lot of return on that. But
because I would almost say, given to what you're saying, a parking lot with illuminated lights might be more of a nuisance than a
flashing billboard.
The sign.
Well, I think of the one, and it's probably an unfair comparison, Hewitt Drive, and it's not a business sign, it's a billboard. And at night, that thing's bright.
We used that as an example last meeting when you were out. We were
Oh.
like, the one on Hewitt Drive.
Yeah, it's
bright, so bright.
You don't miss it. You see it every time.
You're blinded
But there's another one on Highway 6 that does not seem near as bright.
Yeah.
And it's huge.
Right.
It's
that
huge.
one.
Can't.
So, I mean, fear of the unknown here is, does this amendment with the verbiage with that auto dimming, does that solve an issue? Would that take away our concerns of it being just way overpowering at night?
It would.
I just don't know. I mean,
Would be
do we
an
have any?
ordinance if you did do that, and it got many complaints about being too bright, you could change the ordinance to a lower, well, they would be,
Would they be
they would be grandfathered.
Yeah, does this, I'm sorry, does it state what
Lumens.
lumens or candle light, candle power this needs to be?
The ordinance
Yeah,
specifies the
0.3.
maximum intensity.
Yeah, and,
Yeah, it was just there.
and again, I want to emphasize that this ordinance amendment is not unique to the Bush's Chicken site. It's
Anything,
applicable
yeah.
citywide. So anywhere you can imagine in a city where we have these smaller frontage lots with an existing residence amongst other smaller frontage lots with existing residents, and over time when those properties change ownership and redevelop redevelop in accordance with our future land use plan and the comprehensive plan, they're going to be going to commercial and leaving the non-conforming residential status that they have today. And so that's part of the recommendation is to approve this to further the city's comprehensive plan.
I would consider it. I think the future says this is a part of signage. This is a part of advertising down the road.
Justin, what does the verbiage say for what size sign we allow that's digital?
Sure.
Talking Cowboy Stadium size.
Yeah, I mean, is there a limit?
It is limited in size. I don't think it's on that screen. If you go to the next one, next slide. There it is, 150 square feet. So it's like 10 by 15.
Pretty big.
Would be the maximum.
That's pretty big on Robson Drive, right?
Depends on how big the property is.
Yeah, that's true. How big the business?
Well,
If you take 6 of those houses and demolish them and create a large site, it's not big enough.
Well, that's another conversation.
This is something that cities all around are debating, you know, signage along commercial corridors and stuff. It's been a discussion. You know, we're kind of at a point where we're in that transition of changing over, but there's a lot of places where
Japan.
you have a lot of pole signs all lined up, and they're requiring now, as redevelopment happens, they're eliminating pole signs, they're going with monument signs, they're wanting to get away
That I can get
from those
behind.
kind of things, so.
Master
Not
plan,
even
Robinson.
low profile and a Google Pen's really all you need.
Mm.
But that's a lot of, the city I was at before, we were going extensively through this, and it's amazing how passionate people get about signs and how angry people. We had a meeting one night over signs, and council members started yelling at each other and the mayor during the meeting because she just didn't want to fist fight to a road over signs.
I can see
So-
that happening here.
So yeah, signs people get very passionate over signs. And we're not even talking about the message, we're just talking about how tall, how big, how much surface area and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of, you know, what do you want the community to look like as it develops out and you're driving down the road? Do you want this, you know, a jungle of big 30, what's our sign height right now? 35 foot?
I think it goes up even higher based on the criteria of the site. You think of Pilot,
Yeah,
Charles.
we allowed 50, well, in the last study, we allowed 50 foot if you were on a state highway frontage or interstate highway frontage, controlled access. If you're on any other road, it was 35 foot. But that actually got reduced, and the trend was more toward monument signs. But, you know, that's kind of what you want to envision as you go forward is.
I don't want the biggest strip on 77.
Something unified signs for sure.
Yeah, no, we actually ended up requiring that
I like that.
you had to have unified
Visual.
signs anywhere where that was an option.
I think it's great. And there's another good example of non-unified signs, and that is the Golden Chick Whataburger.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's
Can I
it.
ask a question?
Yeah.
May I ask one?
Sure, what you got?
if y'all change, and forgive me if my phrase is wrong, if y'all change the ordinance for them to allow this sign, any other businesses along Robinson Drive, and I'm gonna lean on cleaning up all of Robinson Drive, okay? But does any other business that fall into this, do they have to come in here and go through the same process to ask you for permission to put in this electronic sign? Or does this open it up so that any and all of them can put up?
Yeah,
Maybe
it
not,
opens
right?
it up, because it would be a signing ordinance.
Currently, this is not
Changing it.
Bush's proposing this. This is
It's
staff.
just a good example.
This is staff proposing this.
Okay.
This is not Bush's.
Okay, well, and I didn't know. So this is a
We're using-
pertinent question than my first statement. You're gonna open a can of worms here if you allow
It
this.
can be. It's
And-
always the unintended
And
consequence.
I'm
of
glad
getting-
you brought up the sign on Hewitt Drive. I didn't raise that because it is a billboard. It blinds me. I'm lucky I don't crash every time I drive by the sign.
I thought
Right.
it has to have
All right, let's
complaints
get back
on
on
it.
point here. Thank you for
Sorry.
yours.
No, thank you.
So my question, I think there were a couple of us that said we hate those kind of signs. So why be less stringent on a ordinance where we already
In our own
are
town.
dismissive of having them anyway? You know?
Just no one liked the signs?
I don't like
No
the
one
look.
liked the video
I think we
signs?
have too many residents still there. I think we're in that weird transition stage.
I personally don't mind them.
Birds, I know.
I kind of lean
That's where it gets
towards
weird.
that. Right now, we're in this funky spot where we've got residences and commercial businesses lining 77.
Right,
This might be something we revisit later
right.
down the road, 2-3 years, when there is more commercial and less residential. Just a thought, because again, we're gonna fight this over parking lot lighting, over fencing. There's gonna be this natural rub against residences and businesses. I would rather at this moment protect the residences that are existing today, because the electronic sign is not going to add exponentially more business, period.
It's
You've got
bushes.
traffic coming to 77, you've got a certain number of people coming down there, and it's not gonna say, that electronic sign really got me.
Their food's better.
They really got me today,
It's cheap.
right? I think maybe at a point in the future where we don't have as many residences, I pray that's sooner than later. But I think that at this point, I would prefer to protect the residents versus give the business one more leverage, one more, I don't know. I don't see the value in it. They're expensive to install, they're expensive to maintain. I don't see you gain much business, but that's just me with the business hat.
If we went with the electronic sign, I would like to see just certain signs, so you don't have one business saying, well, he's got 150 sign, I want a 250 to outdo him. I want something to be where it's all the same if they're gonna put electronic signs up.
The size of the tree.
Well, somebody like to make a motion and we'll see where we take it.
I'll make
Yes.
a motion.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 2022-017 for the change of the co-location adjustment in the policy, but no change to the automated sign policy. So I'm allowing, because this policy has the two, so I'm allowing for the co-location, but not allowing the change for the signage adjustment.
I second
Unified
that.
signs, yes.
Yes.
Illuminated, no.
I'll second that.
I think Charlie did.
Oh, did you?
Good job.
Sorry. Did you get Mr. Burks on that,
No.
Misty? Who seconded that?
Misty.
You got that? Okay. Okay. All right, we have a motion to approve the unified signage and disapprove the illuminated. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Item 15, consider possible action approving an amendment to the plan review and inspection services agreement with Bureau Veritas to include fire plan review and fire inspections within the city of Robinson. Justin or Craig or both, or
architected. So our current agreement with Bureau Veritas is for plan review and building inspection in regards to basically building codes, but that excludes the fire marshal services, reviewing fire plans for fire suppression systems, sprinkler systems, fire suppression systems for commercial vent hoods, annual inspections, annual fire inspections, and such inspections, fire alarm, plan review and inspections. So with our fire marshal no longer with the city, we need some backup to our volunteer fire.
New system wake up.
Me?
I think you might have hit that mic.
Okay. We would need some backup to our volunteer fire department to provide these services whenever they're unable to. We have the proposed agreement in the agenda item to the council and recommend approval. We do have some projects needing immediate use of this agreement for review of fire suppression systems at mortuaries and other businesses, and be available to answer questions of the council.
This contract doesn't lock us into something other than just their payment agreement, because we right now are on a per day or per usage with BV, right? We haven't locked into BV for a contract. This is just an agreement to add these services to them.
Correct. We don't have an exclusive service with BV for building plan review and inspections, and so we can add others to provide the same services. And just like with this agreement, this is not exclusive, so we could have other fire marshal services provided by other service providers.
Or in-house or so if we need to. Or
If we have some availability to do it in-house, we certainly do it in-house. One thing that we would want to say with this is that we do not have in our fee schedule any fees for recouping the cost that Bureau Veritas would charge us for review of fire plans and inspection of fire facilities, fire prevention facilities. And so that would be something that we would want to look at with the next fee schedule update, because all we have right now is the building permit fee to help us recover the costs of paying Bureau Veritas to provide these required services.
I have some questions regarding, and again, I understand fees. So previous fire marshal did inspections that cost to the business of a annual fire inspection or a opening for that was not given to the business owner. That fee was not.
No, we didn't charge them for annual fire inspections. We didn't have
Under this
fee schedule.
And it's not in the fee schedule, but what you said you're talking about potentially adding that to the fee schedule.
Correct. Yes.
So then the annual inspections will be paid for by the businesses.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm talking about annual fire inspections. Yes.
That would typically be a service just like police services. You don't really recoup
Yeah, it's
your
more of the
costs.
plan review.
Okay.
If we can't find someone to come in part-time to fill that role, then for the plan review part, but we wouldn't envision charging that for the annual fire inspection. We would still have to pay it for BV to do it. But
Plan review and inspection.
if we can,
For the
find
things that
somebody.
require.
So if any of you that are associated with the volunteer fire department know anybody there that's qualified to do plan reviews and inspections and might be interested, let me know or have them reach out to me or something. We definitely, if we could go that route, we would like to see if we could get somebody. The previous fire marshal was working 16 hours a week. So,
Understood.
but in the interim, we do have to continue to provide these services. So right now, the salary savings can offset the cost we incur in the short term, but if we're gonna do it long term, we probably need to look at adding something to our fee schedule.
Any other questions?
I have none.
No questions.
Motions?
Motion to approve the amendment to the plan review and inspection service agreement with Bureau Veritas to include fire plan review and fire inspections within the city of Robinson.
I'll second that.
All right, motion is to approve this amendment. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. When we talk about the savings of salary to cover this and see it in the future, we're not talking about this year's budget, right?
We're talking about the budget we're in right now, is we'll just use that. We'll do that in a mid-year adjustment.
If needed, if and when needed.
Yeah.
Okay. Item 16, consider and possible action authorizing the city manager to enter into a professional services agreement with Raftalis Financial Consultants to perform a water and wastewater rates study with the city of Robinson for an amount not to exceed $65,000. Mr. Lemay.
So as we've discussed a couple times previously, as we've gone through this RFQ process, we've got several challenges coming at us with these increase in potential commercial customers coming to the city. The way our rates are currently structured, they're structured very heavily reliant on the residential properties, probably under set below where they need to be for commercial, especially large water users. We've also got some potential equity issues, and we're also, the way our rates are structured, we're pushing everything to the base rate, and I have concerns about whether or not we're going to be able to cover some of the costs in the future on the wastewater side, since we're charging 77 cents per 1,000 gallons for residential and 88 cents per 1,000 gallons for commercial, and we're paying the WMR's wastewater treatment facility $1.30 per 1,000 to treat the wastewater. If we get especially if we get a large commercial user, we're going to get upside down really fast. So we definitely need to take a look at how our rates are structured. I know there was a study done, I think in 2013, but it was really just to figure out how much to raise rates to cover all the different costs, but it really wasn't looking at how to best structure those rates going forward. So what this study does is it evaluates that. It also takes into consideration, will take into consideration the potential impact of the automated metering system and how those new, more efficient meters going in the ground will impact customers. We have a lot of customers that have very old meters, and replacing those with new meters is going to cause them to be read more accurately, and the break they've been getting is going to go away, and they're going to see potential significant spikes. So we feel like the timing of doing a study and trying to incorporate all that at once, and then having some kind of phase-in program to make that happen as we go through this, plus upcoming needs for water plant expansion, potential reservoir construction and things. There's just a lot of challenges. So we went through this process. As explained previously, we ranked the top 3 firms. We did reach out to Raftalis. We originally budgeted $66,000 for a rate study. They came in, their estimated cost to conduct the actual study is $55,259. They did provide us with a listing of potential things they can do to help us through this process, whether it's focus groups or deliverables to help us communicate the changes, why the changes are necessary, how the changes will be implemented, and things like that. So we're recommending to do the agreement at the $65,000, and once we if this is approved, we'll meet with them and plan how to set up the best approach on the communication side as we go forward with the study. But the timing is to start second half of this month with hopefully everything delivered by the end of July. And then that'll allow us in our budgeting process to start determining if we want to do some kind of phase-in implementation or how we want to make whatever changes we decide to make. It'll give us plenty of time to start planning for those. And you have in your packet the scope of work proposal as well as the agreement. The attorney has reviewed it, had several suggested changes which they did agree to. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Council?
Nada.
I have nothing.
Motions?
Make a motion that we authorize the city manager to enter into a professional services agreement with Rafaelis Financial Consultants Incorporated to perform water and wastewater rate study for the city of Robinson for the amount not to exceed $65,000.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. All right, we have a motion to authorize the city manager to enter into a professional services agreement with Raptilis. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, item 17, consider possible action casting the city's votes for selection on the McLean County Rural Transit District ballot for place 5, precinct 1. Last month, this was brought to us by Judge Felton. This was the previous, a board that I sat on the previous year, made the recommendation and nomination for Brittany McLean to be nominated for that spot. We got the ballot back. We can cast 20 votes to our candidate, and 10 must be, no, excuse me. We have 20 votes. Only 10 votes may be cast for the city's own nominee. So therefore, we have 10 votes to put to another nominee. Personally, I would think that we would put our 10 votes to Mrs. McLean and our remaining 10 votes to Lorena, just as they're a little further south and closer to our area than the other. Bruce Valetti doesn't have a nominee, or neither does Moody.
I don't have any, I don't disagree with that. I have a question in regards to Bruceville and Moody. Do they get votes even though they have no nominee?
Yeah, I believe they do.
Have you
Oh,
or
the city will get to vote, yes, yeah.
have either you or Ms. McLean reached out to Bruceville or Moody?
Called them earlier.
No call return.
Yeah.
I would.
They didn't answer.
I agree with Mayor. Lorena gets the other 10,
Yeah.
and then maybe all of us call Bruceville and Moody and give them a.
That's your motion? Have
That
a
is my
second?
motion. Motion to.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have a motion to put 10 votes to Brittany McLean and 10 votes to Lorena. Katrina George, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 18 is
seconded that?
discussion. Continuation of discussing on the recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Commission to approve amending ordinance 2018-006, the zoning ordinance for the city of Robinson, Texas. This is just continuation of a discussion with no action, so staff is needing recommendation. Mr. French, do we need a 5-minute break here? Or?
You know, I would.
Let's do that. 5-minute break at 7:44.
When you don't get it.
They went, yeah. Two cities got to not vote. They were like, you know what?
So you need to contact each council individually and mayor.
I would love your vote.
I don't know. They probably already had a council meeting.
It's not even one.
I wouldn't be surprised. It can probably be this.
I never
week.
turned it on.
Well, it wouldn't have been on last week's or last month's agenda. No.
Or it could have been last one too.
Oh.
If they were ahead of us.
Wait,
Yeah, I want you on this thing.
Testing,
wait, it's
testing.
like voting, like it's against them, like,
Oh, now it has a red light.
like Lorena could win, and I don't have to do that?
There's that potential, but so,
Oh, no, I
sounds like
hope
you're
that
trying to get out
doesn't
of it. So I'm calling.
All 20 of them.
Be sure to read all that. Okay.
You said you were gonna catch up.
Your application.
Come on. I am. I'm honored.
Within 90 days.
I was like, what the hell?
Because otherwise.
Just kidding, I know where it is now.
But
I
it's
didn't
very
realize much.
interesting to us. Yeah, maybe more interesting.
Okay, so what's the thing in July? Oh, yeah.
Oh.
What? No, what were you
I was
gonna
gonna say, the gas station bill.
Oh, my.
I mean, I think either way, I mean, it's good that it's gonna be cleaned up.
Right, but that's a bad investment on his part. Unless we
It
change
is.
the ordinance. That's why I was like, I don't even want to approve it.
The only
because I
other
feel
thing
like
that can happen is if sit there and he owns the land.
Yeah.
So.
But I have a gas station right across the street from the gas station. I just hate the way that works.
Yeah, I mean, they're everywhere though.
Huh?
They're everywhere.
And they're not expensive.
Yeah. But how
I mean,
can you
he-
approve the new setback?
He owns the land, so
Yeah.
it's either let it clean it up or let it sit there and rot.
Yeah, I know. I mean, when Jimmy said that, I was like, good point. But
I don't know, I mean, that's a hard
he
one
had to
for
be
sure.
taken back
Once you're out of the place.
about the
They might as well
Huh? Yeah, I don't think you did. I don't think they could. Yeah. Unless you like put a hamburger place in there that's like the nice hamburgers and shit. You know, something like that brings people to go specifically to that one. I suggested
But the,
tamales.
I don't think we need to gas station. I
Tamales. So
think
like, you know, if somebody's known for something, you know, you'd be more opted to go
the
in
issue I
there
have is
rather than go out.
a gas pump faces
It's
sitting
better
on
than
his
the
fixed
easy.
facing the gas pump. If he puts his money and he does all the upgrades, it's gonna look a lot better
That's
than
the scary part.
And he's already opened so many, so like that's
But what I know it looks like is
yeah,
look better than anything
like-
sitting there vacant for the next 3 years. Because he owns it unless he puts it up for sale. And the next guys that come do the research and say, hey, I want to buy.
But then he's already bought the pump, so I don't know what that means. Like, he can't resell it.
That's gonna be the trouble.
I'm literally worried for that guy. We need a follow-up.
Study that was done, being updated.
It's been so long, off and on and off and on. But
Yeah.
He was shown.
And then they repaint it. Like, I mean, the back fence, I feel like that was like within the last year, right? Where they got some black and they had painted for sale and then they did it.
We'll re-adjourn. Okay, Mr. French.
Slide. We do the same purple as the sign ordinance.
Issue right after the sign ordinance, right?
Yeah, we're looking at the precinct 1 region ballot. on the
Oh, it's
screen.
because that's, sorry, I had it frozen.
There we go. Okay, and skip a few slides ahead. Several. One more, back one more. Right there. Oh, there. Nope, sorry, it went to the beginning again. There we go. Okay, so this discussion is going to primarily focus on the 2 areas in the drafted zoning ordinance to discuss the ZBA special exceptions, specifically criteria for the special exceptions that we've identified in this drafted ordinance amendment. And then secondly, continued discussion of front yard fencing regulations. I did a survey of several cities in McLennan County. Go to the next slide, please. Next slide. Okay. And so, sorry, the previous slide. Okay, this is what our zoning ordinance has today in regards to special exceptions. It's very brief. It doesn't mention what special exceptions. Best practice would be to list all special exceptions in this section of the zoning ordinance for quick reference, and then also have any built-in criteria that must be reviewed and met for any special exception that's being considered by the zoning board of adjustment for approval. And just to recap, the difference between a variance request to ZBA and a special exception request to ZBA is that the variance must have a hardship that is identified on the property, with the property, whereas a special exception does not. And they both should be in the spirit and intent of the ordinance and meet the goals of the comprehensive plan, but there's a big difference between a special exception and a variance request. Okay, next slide now. So this is the proposed ordinance where we're pulling in from other sections of the ordinance where we reference special exceptions are required, and then also identifying a few others that have been identified as ones that would be appropriate as a special exception if we wanted to go that route, because we have requests for them so frequently that often the community is unaware, surprised, alarmed that we are overreaching with our regulations. And so to provide some kind of avenue that they can request a special exception would be a way to appease those residents and provide them due process before a proper authority that could consider their request and then render a verdict. So just to recap, some of those would be a carport located in the front yard or side yard setback, parking, driveways, and maneuvering area over unimproved surfaces. We do have some properties that are grandfathered, but we have several properties where people are still wanting to just drive on the grass or lay down gravel for a driveway surface that is not 5 acres or more in zoned agricultural district. We have garage enclosures without providing a 2-car enclosed garage elsewhere on the property. Those are still very common. Accessory buildings constructed on our property without a principal building on the property. Often property owners, builders want to buy land, have an accessory building, store materials in that accessory building while they're building their residence, or just use that property with an accessory building without having a principal use on the property other than that accessory building.
In a residential zone though? Can you give me an example of where that works?
Real estate, 4.5 acres. I mean that's where the zoning board of adjustment would have to consider that request, but
We got real sticky in this situation. The reason the whole thing came up to where you couldn't have an accessory dwelling was because we had a barndominium go before a house, and they never built the house. An accessory building, I understand, is different than an accessory dwelling, but they could use it as a dwelling.
I'm not sure I follow that exactly.
Well,
You said
I'm
it was a
curious about-
particular property?
Do what?
There was a particular property that was approved
Yeah,
as a...
this was years ago. This is how the accessory dwelling cannot be, you can't build a barndominium or an accessory building prior to a principal residence today.
Correct, yes.
And this is the reason why, because the guy never built the house. He lied right there at the pulpit.
Okay.
It's happened more recent than.
Yeah.
Now that the state's mandated that cities cannot regulate building materials, we have seen an increase in what people are coming in asking to do a barndominium on their acreage, and before is often the exterior building materials that prohibited them from doing it, but now what's happening is that they're meeting the minimal standards for the rural estate district. They're providing 1,600 square feet of living area, air-conditioned space, they're providing the 2-car garage, they're providing all our design criteria, and it does look like an accessory building, but it's meeting all our criteria for a single-family residence.
I'm okay in RE, but in SF1 in particular, I mean, it's hard to do in 2 and 3, but is that for use in all residential areas? Like SF1, somebody wanted to, now granted, they have to come in and get a variance from ZBA on it, right?
The draft ordinance would have them coming before ZBA to get a special exception. Accessory building without a principal building or use in a residential or agricultural zoning district.
Fully understand the ag district.
Right.
The residential's a little sticky.
Sure.
I mean, I guess we're leaving that in the power of ZBA, whether they do it or not, but.
Yeah, I'm still struggling with several of these, and I'm trying to recall the conversation as it was going. So 2, 4, and 6. No, 2, 5, and 6. Really, I'm concerned. So we're creating a list of potentially approved special exceptions.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm not for parking in my front yard.
Potentially requested special exceptions, I would say, not necessarily approved. That would be.
This
up to the zoning
list
board
is here
adjustment.
because these keep going to ZBA and ZBA keeps approving.
Yeah, and I don't want to put it in a
variance request without a legitimate hardship. If we had a city attorney, for example, on staff that attended every ZBA meeting that would provide some kind of legal counsel to the board for a lot of our cases, we may have different results than as we do right now. So, so this is, again, a way to provide due process to appease some of the community and allow city staff to address a vast number of code violations through a ZBA process that would then result in potential denial, and then the appeal would have to be to district court and not with anyone else in the city staff, relieving city staff of the burden of dealing with that property any longer.
Maybe I'm just confused, but I see this as creating the impression, if I'm, looking to, I just got a code violation because I parked my truck right in front of my porch. I'm talking about linkways in front of I step out of my truck and onto my porch. In my in my front yard. Well, to me, you've already created a list of special exemptions, or special exceptions. So I'm coming to ZBA now, going to ask you for what you've already printed that I could have. That's how I'm reading it.
Right, and that's kind of leading into our discussion about the criteria that we may want to include if we do decide to include these special exceptions. So again, the benefit of having this is to accommodate for those wanting to request that the ordinance is different, that the ordinance doesn't prohibit them, but then allows them an avenue to seek approval of what they're proposing. That would then, if it's not found to be in the spirit and intent of the zoning ordinance and the city's comprehensive plan, is denied by ZBA, which are members appointed by the city council, and then it has to be appealed to district court, which the city staff does no longer have to manage. So this takes the burden off of our code enforcement for the city in some regards, in that this list is developed because of the excessive number of requests for these particular items that is difficult for just one code enforcement officer to manage and take through our municipal court process to have properties that have been found in violation to come into compliance. So,
Still just struggling with it.
And we can come back to this, but the point of the discussion tonight, I'm kind of leading up to, and if we go to the next slide.
Well, and let me touch on
Next
before you go
slide.
to, I think the challenge is, we go out, we try to enforce the code, the people don't want to follow the code, they come in, they file a variance for what they're doing, they go to ZBA, and ZBA grants the variance.
So now I'm playing another role. So now I'm on the ZBA, and I get one of these cases coming to me. Now I'm going to look at that list and say, well, this is what council said we could do. Council
Well,
put
this
this.
is what council says you may
You
be
may
under a
request.
hardship.
No,
If
this-
you
No,
wanna
don't need a
require
hardship. Don't need a hardship. We put a list together of things that
And
special
that's-
exemptions. So
and
now
that's
I'm thinking from the mindset of a zoning guy.
That's exactly why we came here tonight to have this discussion, is to develop the criteria that the council wants to place with each of those special exceptions, so the zoning board of adjustment is just not thinking what you said they would
Yeah,
think.
we're just, I don't want to write a list of things, hey, you can approve these. If you get a lot of requests, if code enforcement gets overwhelmed with this type of request, we'll just go ahead and start your line. Because I just don't think some of them that are on the list are in the best interest of anybody.
Okay, and that's what we're here to discuss. So in the survey of other cities, in their special exception criteria, I just looked at the main cities that I found in McLennan County, and the city of Waco was unique. I hadn't seen this before. Their ZBA only hears appeals. They do not have any ZBA variances or special exceptions that their ZBA has authority to consider. Instead, what City of Waco has is what they call special permit requests that go to P&Z and City Council. So, so all those items that we saw before in Waco, I could see those being items that would go to P&Z and City Council rather than to the Zoning Board of Adjustment as a special exception request here in Robinson. I don't have the data or the input to know how much these other cities are dealing with front yard fencing, unimproved surfaces. I know Lorena passed an ordinance that relaxed their paving criteria for residential properties and has a unique standard that's more than gravel but less than concrete or asphalt. And that was just put into their codes as an allowed driveway surface.
Are you saying that Waco, you do the special permit request through P&Z and council? If you're denied, then you appeal it to ZBA?
That's a good question. So, yes, that could be their process. I didn't see it written out that clearly, but the appeal is an appeal of any determination of the application of the zoning ordinance. And that's what the appeals are going to the Waco ZBA as, is a similar process. And with an appeal process, you often have, sitting over here, the one appealing with their attorney, and then sitting over here, the city's attorney with the city staff. And then they each have turns before the zoning board of adjustment and speak their arguments, and then it's deliberated and the zoning board of adjustment takes action.
So
And why-
maybe the approach here is, instead of doing all this, we need to budget money to have an attorney at ZBA meetings.
Well, I'm also hearing, well, that might work too. So currently getting a lot of these types of requests overwhelming our code enforcement, all to be undone because zoning or ZBA decided to go ahead and allow it, effectively wasting all the time and effort our code enforcement put in. I think there's also a broken process there. People we have on that are doing that to our
I
staff.
said we either have an ordinance or we don't.
Right, so.
I kind of like what you said.
Again, the zoning board of adjustment should be they should be acting in the best interest of the city. They should be consistent with the comprehensive plan, the purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance, the criteria that's laid out in the zoning ordinance for them to rule upon. And it's not, it's not just what they,
I was trying to be diplomatic.
right.
It sounds to me like
it's
it
not who
should be
you
based
know
on
or how
some
nice
criteria.
somebody is or that they're a good person. Or
Yeah, it sounds like ZBA is pretty soft and
Uh-huh.
not backing up staff, period.
Correct. Now, we
Here.
do have a shortage of ZBA. We have, for example, we have one ZBA member that wants to apply to the ZBA, but if he did, we wouldn't have a quorum of the ZBA members to act on his request. So the members of the ZBA are appointed by city council, and the city council can at any time take them on and appoint new people to the ZBA to act in those seats of the ZBA. And so when you're interviewing candidates for the ZBA, these are some of the questions that you would want to ask them is, how do you feel about these special exceptions? Do you feel like you can be voting in favor of the purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance, consistent with the comprehensive plan, and in harmony with the community is often a language that is in the zoning board of adjustment section of the zoning ordinance.
When,
So, yes.
when these cases come before ZBA, are you there to give them an overview of what the ordinance is currently and how it is being enforced?
What it is currently, yes. When you say how it's being enforced.
I mean, like, so this is being brought because code enforcement has been at this property and has issued citation or whatever we do, and now application for an adjustment. So they're aware of all this.
Correct.
And then,
And they're aware of the ordinance criteria of what they're supposed to weigh when they make a decision.
and we're
I
just
think
trying
we're
to
tightening
strengthen.
some of that language up with this revision, right?
Correct.
Yes, we're
I-
trying to tighten up some of it, but they're giving the information that's in the ordinance, which comes from the state law, of what they're supposed to consider when they grant a variance. But it's not really Mr. Prince's place to tell them how to make a determination.
You can't even, so in a ZBA situation, staff can't even make a recommendation to ZBA? Like you do to council on recommending approval or denial with condition, whatever.
If there's criteria in our ordinance, I could, based on that criteria. If there's goals and objectives in our comprehensive plan that I could cite specifically that apply to that request, I could. If it is a stated hardship by the applicant, that's where I have a difficult time, because that would be a decision of the board. The board has that authority, and we have some language being proposed in the zoning ordinance that would provide some more parameters for the granting or denial of variance requests, and where they must identify a hardship and where they have rights to grant a variance when the hardship is only financial, but a certain percent of the value of the property it must meet to meet that criteria to only be financial. Part of the challenge is also best practices are found by with cities that are enforcing planning case law and not necessarily things that are mandated by the state in reference to state statutes. But there are several cases that have gone through certain courts at various levels, and it hasn't been vetted out completely, but it has been enough to the point where you kind of know the result if it were to be appealed to district court, if it were to be, processed further along than just at the municipal court level or the zoning board of adjustment level. And so training up our zoning board of adjustment to understand all that is difficult, but putting it in the zoning ordinance as criteria for them to act upon, that would be easy, because then the city staff can just reference that rather than pulling out, in this case, the Texas Supreme Court did this action, and that was following this action. It's already been done by best practices in the planning profession that's discussed at conferences I attend, at planning workshops and various things that kind of promote planning and are looking for the best practices on how to make communities better. So continuing on with what the survey found is that the city of Woodway processes special exceptions as appeals. So this is also something I've never seen before. There's no mention of variances or hardships in their ZBA authority. Everything's processed as an appeal. They mention special exceptions, but it's used kind of just kind of loosely. They have some very minimal criteria in regards to requests to the zoning board of adjustment for reconstruction of non-conforming uses, extension of a non-conforming use, modifications to yards, open spaces, lot area, lot widths, which is another way of saying variance, but not requiring the hardship to grant the variance. And then they even have the ZBA with authority to permit uses, which is not a best practice for the ZBA, which is a quasi-judicial board. Land use is a executive function of the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council, and so that's not a recommended best practice. The City of West, they have appeals, variances, and special exceptions, which are the three main types of requests that go to the zoning board of adjustment. However, their special exceptions have no specific criteria, and they don't list or identify some of the specific special exceptions that are being proposed to you in this drafted ordinance. Okay, next slide, Dustin. The city of McGregor has a similar setup where their special exceptions have no specific criteria. City of Hewitt, also no specific criteria for special exceptions. Instead, what these cities and what a lot of cities have, even when they do have specific criteria for granting special exceptions, is some very general purpose and intent statement, such as the special exception must be in harmony with the spirit and purpose of these regulations, or the special exception is warranted because it's that necessary to secure development. That particular language is more of a lenience towards approving special exceptions than I would say in the harmony of the spirit and purpose of the zoning ordinance. That would be more of, you really have to see how this is benefiting the bigger picture and not just that individual property owner. The city of Lorena, again, has no specific special exception criteria. Their ZBA section for special exceptions is exactly what we have in Robinson. It mentions ZBA has the authority to grant them, but it doesn't list what special exceptions can be requested in that section of the ordinance. Special exceptions must be identified in the ordinance if they are to be requested through the ZBA. Otherwise, it would have to be a variance request. Variance requests are infinite. There's no limit to the number of different types of variance requests that could be requested because they're not listed in the ordinance. They could be really anything that someone wants to vary within the ordinance. The city of Bellman, I was still researching this when I had to turn in this PowerPoint, but they are similar in that they have special exceptions, but their list of special exceptions are not any of the ones that we're requesting or that we're discussing to possibly being the drafted ordinance. Their special exceptions are in regards to non-conforming, issuing permits, issuing modifications, which is, again, it's basically a variance without using the word variance, and there's no mention of having to prove up a hardship. Actually, I'm sorry, there is a mention of variance and proving up a hardship in the city of Bellevue, but they have a special exception that would allow someone to request the same thing, and their criteria is that it cannot be appropriately improved without such modification. So what you have there is the zoning board of adjustment is determining what is appropriate. And so it's just another way of someone requesting a variance without having to prove up a hardship. They would just have to request that the ZBA finds what they're requesting is appropriate. And so that I can see how that could be abused easily. They also have criteria on permitting accessory use of a parking area. I think that was similar to what some of the other cities had. And so in summary, I didn't really find a good example or good business, best management practices from any of the cities in the county. And so that was all the research I was able to do between last city council meeting and this city council meeting. But I'm welcome to do some more research outside of the county to find some best practices that we would want to discuss next time, that are with some of the cities like in the Dallas-Fort Worth area that I'm familiar with. So just look for direction on this section before we move on to discussion of the front yard fencing.
So I'm not a fan of the special exception criteria. I'm also not happy that ZBA or any of us are backing up or not backing up our code enforcement officers. We create and we spend time and energy creating these ordinances just for people to do what they want and then come back and ask for forgiveness later. I think I've said before in one of our meetings, I'm just going to start being the bad guy. We live in a city, we have rules, we have regulations. Shame on them for not finding out what they should or shouldn't be following. Shame on us for not backing up our code enforcement officer.
Yeah.
So for me, unless we say we're going to delete or remove the special exception criteria, I have nothing else to say.
I echo Mr. Steiner's comments. It just needs to be said louder
For the people in the back?
for everybody. I just really, to me, it just makes my stomach turn in knots thinking that we're wasting all this time and energy. This is speaking of our code enforcement officer, it's a person we send out to do our dirty work.
Literally.
We are putting in the hot seat on the front line to get cussed at, yelled at, and we're not backing them up. I think
Point of where they're wearing a camera now.
Yeah.
I'll take it one step further. How many seats on a ZBA currently? How many not
5.
open seats, but total seats?
There's 4 of the 5 seats are filled.
4 of the 5 seats are filled. I think we need to be looking for 5 ZBA
And 2
members.
alternates are vacant. 2 alternate seats are vacant.
Yeah.
I don't like hearing that we're not backing up staff, and yeah, I think that we have a variance process. I don't want to create a second process that's just a little different than the other process. All of these items that we're going to create a list for, we have a process in place that should work. I understand now that it's not, but it should work. I mean, I understand there's this verbiage or hardship, but truthfully, prove to us, to the ZBA, that the city, that there is a hardship when it comes to our ordinances, because they're not there for dumb reasons. They're there for very important reasons. And I don't think that we're going to help it by creating a list of special exemption or creating a second process that just eliminates the word hardship. I mean, prove to us that there's a hardship, and I mean, sure, I got no beef with that.
You said some of them go straight to appeal. Is that what you said? Like, what's that process? Was it Hewitt or whatever slide? It said it goes straight to appeal.
Like Woodway on the previous slide, they only, the ZBA only hears appeal requests. And so their special exceptions are treated as appeals.
So you could be, we could be seeing their
appeals.
No, we would be seeing the cases.
The case.
And then if we deny it, then ZBA could.
No, that's City of Waco that has
I
special
think if
permits.
our ZBA isn't seeing the
I know, I
vision
feel
that
like
we're
we just
doing, that
and then-
council's
No, but I
gotta
think-
see them.
Yeah.
I think what he's saying is what Woodway is doing
You go to
is,
the previous
if
slide.
you don't agree with the enforcement of the ordinance, you appeal the enforcement, right?
Right.
Correct.
Which then
You're
goes to
saying,
who?
I don't agree with what the ordinance says, I'm
That's-
appealing
you go
it
to
to
the previous slide.
it's just a different.
It's still
word
the
for
same
word.
thing.
Still showing the
I know,
same.
it's just
It's the same thing.
Just a
So I
different
thought by
way
appeal it went to like city
Oh, I
council
think you
instead
went
of
to that.
ZBA.
Yeah, no, they're just appealing what's
Right there, right there. Thank you. Okay, so,
only
yes, the
hears
City of
appeals,
Waco
yeah.
only hears appeals, and so, they have a special permit request that goes to P and Z and City Council. And then, the City of Waco mentions that their special exceptions are processed as appeals. And there's no mention of variances or hardships, just like, City of Waco has no
I've-
mention of variances or hardships.
Being a nerd that I am, have watched a few Woodway council, not Woodway, Waco council meetings, and I've never seen any special permit come across. I don't know if you've ever watched it.
Fascinating, I'm sure.
It's different for sure. There's no discussion like we do. It's already decided.
Well,
They have a business
discussed
meeting
before.
prior.
They have
Which we could
pre-meetings
do.
where they do all their discussion.
And
So
it's
that when they have a
almost
meeting,
always
it's just
decided.
boom, 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 boom,
Well,
boom.
they're doing a business meeting, we're doing a business and formal meeting together.
Yeah, I
like
get
this
it.
way.
But I haven't seen, and I haven't watched them all. I only
I feel
watched a
like-
few special permits come across theirs. I mean, I don't know how their code enforcement, they've got attorneys on staff, they've got code enforcement. It is what it is. And
Well, they got more people in their code enforcement
For what?
section than what we.
And they've got a pretty
We have
substantial
police
legal
officers.
staff.
Yeah, I think what I also think I see in Waco is ordinance is the ordinance, guys. It is what it is. It was written, thought out, planned. Are there some exceptions? Absolutely. But those are rare exceptions. I got really concerned with, these are the types of code enforcement things that are, that we're overwhelming code enforcement with, and then they're just getting overturned essentially through the ZBA process. I don't think you see that. Do the other cities experience that?
That's what I couldn't tell just from the time I had to research their ordinances. I didn't have the time to call their city staff and
Yeah.
kind of ask them questions. But doing this survey, it was eye-opening to me. I did not know that the other cities were had this in their ordinance. So I can see now, whereas before I couldn't see us eliminating special exceptions as an authorized duty and use purpose of the zoning board of adjustment. I think that's what I'm hearing some of the council at least considering now is just eliminate that section, and anywhere in our ordinance that references a special exception with the one exception, or the one area of exception being in our non-conforming use section, whereas it's very common for the ZBA to hear requests for extension of a non-conforming use. Our ordinance says you can extend a non-conforming use up to 25% of the existing area by going to ZBA rather than rezoning the property so that it has to come into conformance before it can expand. Otherwise, without that criteria for ZBA's authority, they would have to go through a rezoning process, come into conformance before they could expand. We had one case since I've been here, and that was the Flat Creek RV Resort, where they are non-conforming use. They wanted to expand, and they wanted to expand up to 25%. They went to zoning board of adjustment. Zoning board of adjustment approved that request, and so they were allowed to expand 25%. Now they're not allowed to expand any further without first bringing the property into conformance. So the non-conforming section is the one section I would think that we would still want to allow ZBA to have that authority, and that authority does not follow the same procedures as variances because it's built into the ordinance as a authority of the ZBA. Another often example of ZBA authority is if there's any kind of discrepancy in the zoning map on what the zoning is, because it does happen at times, then that type of request for clarification of what the zoning map is would often go to the zoning board of adjustment to determine that zoning is this rather than this. So,
I wish we could do away with all of the verbiage of appeals, variance, special exemptions, and just call it appeal. So if you don't like the ordinance, appeal, right? Like just one word. And maybe ZBA can vet some of those, and anything that they want to approve then comes to council, so we can obviously.
Once ZBA hears it, we
So-
go.
Well, that's what I'm saying, that we
Right.
can't trust them.
So my thought is with that, the non-conforming uses, continuing with ZBA having that authority, would today's gas station case fall into that? Because could they go and get a ZBA to say, wait a second, we'll let you do what you want to do and operate without conforming to today's code? Because that I wouldn't want to give them. I don't know if that's just.
I have to check our ordinance. I know we have it where it's ZBA authority to grant an extension or expansion of a non-conforming use. But
I don't think that gives them the authority to just waive.
that would be granting a use to a property.
You know,
is the way it's-
But there was one city that was
That will
doing
let that,
you
yeah.
said uses, but we don't allow that. That currently ZBA does not allow use,
Woodward
grant
does.
uses in Robinson.
Correct. We don't identify any
Okay.
use that ZBA.
I just wouldn't want, I just wouldn't want a non-conforming property to have a back door to get too much. I mean, I understand 25%, Don Hardware wants to expand, or, you know, whatever the business is in that building, they need another office space. What's the harm in that, right? Go to your ZBA for something of that nature, right?
But I can't
But-
park in the front yard.
But parking in your front yard, make me mad.
Approved.
Yeah, I just don't wanna, I don't know. I say strike the special exemption, period.
So like reduce it greatly, but not necessarily eliminate it in regards to the non-conforming section.
Yeah, don't let me walk off a cliff with this, but
Okay.
yeah, I say get rid, I mean,
And
we
I
have
can
a
present
process.
what that would look like, of course, before any
Yeah,
public hearing or action by the council.
I hate to keep beating it up, but
Okay. Is that consensus and direction? Okay. So Destiny, go to the next slide. And next slide. Okay, so front yard fencing. From my research, we had zoning in 1978, and this is our fence ordinance from 1978. It says no fence more than 30% solid or more than 3 feet in height, may be located within 30 feet of a street intersection. So it's basically the visibility triangle regulation that we have now today as referenced as a visibility triangle. Except as provided in this other section, fences less than 6 feet high may be located on any part of a lot. And then all premises in the R district used for open storage shall have a solid fence not less than 7 feet high, completely enclosing the area used for open storage. So these parameters would allow a fence greater than 30 inches in the front yard. And then go to the next slide. And then jump to 2014 when we adopted that zoning ordinance. We established what is the same as our zoning ordinance today for front yard fencing. We did away with the applicability being for all properties. We only have it regulating single and two-family dwellings. And then it's regulating front yard and behind front yard. And the restriction is not to exceed 30 inches in height. So we did receive a complaint of a new fence constructed on Lux Drive, and the code enforcement officer went there, found a newly constructed 8-foot tall wood privacy fence, very nice looking fence, constructed in front of the house along the side property lines, and it's set back 30 feet from the front property line. It doesn't go across in front of the house, it's just on the side property lines. We do not require, under today's ordinance, a fence permit to review these things and know the intentions of property owners beforehand. So we find out after the fact and then gave the property owner notice of violation after neighbors have complained about the fence. And they have now requested a variance of the zoning board of adjustment, and their hardship is that they're not allowed an aesthetic on their property that others in the Lux Edition and South Hall Edition have been allowed. And so the violator was complaining about all the other fences around them that are greater than 30 inches in height. And so the code enforcement officer went to the other properties and found about a dozen other properties with just within the Lux Edition and South Hall Edition with fences in the front yard that are greater than 30 inches in height. Some privacy fences, a lot of them were like chain link or had more transparency to them. And the code enforcement officer is now reviewing Google Street View, which is from 2013, and comparing it to the effective date of this 2014 zoning ordinance that limits fence height to no more than 30 inches. So if that fence was there in 2013, greater than 30 inches, then it falls under the 1978 ordinance and will very likely be permissible. But if it's not there, then the argument could be made that it is in violation of this 2014 ordinance, that then the code enforcement officer would give notice of violation to that property owner of that violation that has existed for approximately 8 years. And so, and that's just, just the South Hall Edition and the Lux Edition that we're looking at, potentially a dozen violations of this ordinance from 2014. So, I think one of the comments mentioned last discussion is that we should put in the ordinance a requirement of front yard fencing getting a permit issued by the city. And so, Destiny, if you go to the next slide. So this is our current zoning ordinance, and then go to the next slide. And this is the proposed ordinance, and then this language right here would be added to the applicability of our Article 8, fence screening and buffering. And it states that in addition to the applicability already here, a permit application is required for any fence or screening device located in the front yard regardless of land use and zoning of the property. And so that would be a change that would be in the draft ordinance when this goes forward to City Council for further discussion or public hearing consideration or adoption. And so the hope is that we would be catching a lot of these fences before they're actually constructed in violation. We would catch them on a site plan shown in violation and notifying the property owner that their permit's not approved, so that they don't go into the investment of constructing a fence that they would then have to modify potentially if they're not granted that variance. Kind of, from the ZBA perspective, you can see how some of them may be struggling with denying variance requests when they get applicants requesting a variance to allow their sometimes $8,000 fence that they just built, they're pointing out their neighbors that have fences similar to them that are in violation, and they never, went and had to get this special approval by city council. And why is the city staff overreaching and requiring this? They point, not just in their neighborhood, but just citywide, fences greater than 30 inches that have been constructed in the city. So I guess I kind of made a point there. But
I would say on that point, though, my thoughts are, our zoning ordinances are what our ordinances are. ZBA needs to adhere to that, let them sort that out in district court if they want to take it, if the applicant wants to take it to different district court. They want to defend their $8,000 fence that they didn't ask or didn't look at.
But if I'm hearing though in that conversation, why do we have a ZBA? What's ZBA for?
We
don't allow anything in the ordinance, then there's why do we have a ZBA?
Moonlight at Surrey Ridge. Here's a great way to prove a hardship. A truck went through my house 3 times. Can I get a fence bigger than 30 inches?
Right.
Yes, sir, you may. Absolutely. Hardship proven, easy. I mean, there's got to be something there.
But I think the idea with the permit where they have to come in, this way somebody's not spending, like you said, $8,000 for a fence.
They weren't going to come whether we had the.
Who would do? Yeah.
They weren't coming whether we had the permit or not.
But that gives you teeth when you go
I agree with you.
court.
I like the permit idea. I think that's solid on fencing and plan review on any, and notify all the major fence companies around here. Hey, you need to come talk to us before you build a fence in Robinson.
Right.
Because you guys are coming out here
We have a fence
accepting
builder that's
nice
in
checks for
violation.
work that is not conforming.
Yeah. Do they know?
Quit being an accomplice to this.
Of our ordinance? Like
So that's just my thoughts on it.
No,
I
they're
would
not
say,
going to.
I mean, we probably need to do diligence, and yeah, I mean, it's gonna suck to have to do code violation on somebody who's had a fence there for 8 years. What's right is right. Is it gonna upset some people? Yeah. I mean, where do you draw the line? Because if you don't hold the line now, today, then everybody else on the block gets one too. And then you just might as well get away with the whole ordinance, because we don't have
an
the,
ordinance that you have to fence your front yard.
might as well.
And that way it's not an issue.
10, 12 foot, whatever, how high.
Everybody lives in their own little palace.
Get a moat.
I'm getting a
You
drawbridge.
need it all.
You have to fence it, but it has to be wrought iron, and it has to be.
My thoughts, anyway, just my thoughts.
I have a question on this.
Sure.
90% transparent open.
Yes.
Does the opening have to be 90%?
We hide the other 10.
Or does the fence have to be 90?
Has to be the opening.
No, we were talking about the entire fence.
I think
90% open?
90% is pretty high. You might as well not have a fence if it's 90% open.
See-through fence.
Meaning, okay.
Like maybe like the gate entrance is a solid, nice fixture. Thinking of,
I'm just talking about wrought
Robinson.
iron. If you have half-inch wrought iron and you have it 3 inches apart, it is not 90% transparent. Even if it's 4 inches apart, it's not 90% transparent.
maybe I'm reading it differently. It's not saying there's the transparency, the distance between the poles or the fencing material has to be, it's like you have to have a transparent fence of some type, 90% of it, and then like say a gate, or Doy Baker's Place has a nice little brick entrance. It's fancy. That's not transparent, but the rest of his fence is kind of like the old brick ordinance of so much percentage had to be brick.
Well, that's why I was trying to get it clarified. Are we talking about
That's how I read that.
90% of the fence has to be made of transparent materials, or does 90% of
That's a good question. I think we need to flesh out.
the, like you're saying,
I haven't done that.
if you're doing
What about
half-inch
subdivision?
wrought iron and you've got them 3 inches apart, it's not going to be 90% transparent.
What about 10, 12 foot subdivision masonry walls? 15-foot masonry wall subdivision.
So they would not require a permit because they wouldn't be in the front yard. They would be allowed up to 8 feet per our current ordinance and the proposed ordinance. I don't think we have anything that would allow greater than 8 feet.
We'll need a sound wall on I-35 if there's development against the interstate. There's a sound wall. That's greater than 8 feet.
Would it be located in the right of way and maintained by the city, or would it be located on private property and maintained private?
I would
He
say-
ain't gonna put it up.
Yeah, I would say
Maybe
on
you
the
do.
development's property
I love our
with, you know, an easement and then a landscape buffer between it and the rest. But that's just me.
If it was in the right of way, then it wouldn't have to meet the zoning ordinance, but if it's on the private property, our ordinance today is limiting it
No,
to
private
8 feet.
property.
And it's measured from the highest adjacent grade within 10 feet of the fence. So if you have sloping ground, it's measuring from the high ground up. So you might have like 10 or 12 feet of fence material length vertically, but the height is only measured at 8 feet.
Those sound fences don't have anything to do with it, but the 10 feet has to do with how far the road is away and where the sound of travel goes over the dwellings. So they could be 20 feet tall if they need to be across an interstate.
Yeah, that's something we could address.
So it might be one of those things that would be appropriate for a variance, though, because not everywhere has sound.
Yeah.
Interstate.
Or the loop.
So right now we have at and behind the front facade of a single family or two family dwelling. The fence must not exceed 8 feet in height above the adjacent grade. And I believe that's the same as what we have today. Destiny, would you go back one slide? Yeah, that's the same as what we have today. I think it's one of those things where we drafted this ordinance, it wasn't a priority or wasn't at the attention, and we kind of overlooked these large rural agricultural properties of 5 acres, 30 acres, 100 acres that fence in their livestock and have 5-foot split rail fencing greater than 30 inches in front of residences, and same thing with perimeter subdivision walls.
So either one on the council know what the reasoning was for the 30-inch? Since we had this ordinance from 78.
Fences and signs were heavy, Rusty Steve when he was on council. And I don't remember what and why the 30-inch came about.
With a 10 or 12 foot tall perimeter subdivision wall, would it need to be, if we're gonna allow it, would it need to be submitted on plan sealed by a professional engineer?
Absolutely,
Yes.
being that height, but I don't put 10 or 12 feet, you don't know what the footage is. Like I said, it could be 20 feet, you don't know. You can't dictate the height.
Oh,
But
You're
that's-
talking
that's-
about specifically sound
He's
walls.
asking about a subdivision wall, yeah.
Okay.
Masonry screen walls need to be engineered, because they'll fall over and kill people.
Absolutely.
There's that. So, and I don't know if this is the appropriate time to ask this question. Fencing over here, just off 77, that case where the nice privacy advertising fence went up.
Yeah.
What's the current state of that? I mean, it's non-conforming, correct?
So I'm trying to relate it to the actual agenda items to stay on topic.
I'm just trying to see how it applies to
Relate
what,
that to it.
Way to go,
what our
Jimmy. Way to
current
go.
Relate
zoning
that to what we're
ordinance
talking about.
is.
Okay, and, tell me again, what's the example? I'm sorry.
So I don't have the address.
It's the fencing company fence.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was commercial property, and under our current ordinance, we don't regulate.
Correct, this is our current ordinance. Our fence regulations, are for single and two family dwellings.
And that property is zoned commercial?
It's zoned commercial, and then there is also a legal non-conforming residence in commercial zoning adjacent to the other property under the same ownership that's vacant commercial where the fence has been constructed. It was
So the-
constructed on the shared property line of the residential property and the vacant commercial property in the same ownership.
And I think there's instances where you would have a tall fence along maybe 77, just say the road. But setback plays a lot into that.
Big time.
You know, when it's right up in your grill, it's one way.
Mhm.
Well, the larger the property is, that setback, there can be
Well, that's
needs of
definitely
having a security
that's
fence
definitely
or
an
whatever.
oversight in our ordinance, because one of the problems is you have a gate right there too, and there's no place for a vehicle to
Pull
really
in.
stop until the gate opens without blocking traffic, so.
If that's like we're ever to develop, how would it comply with our landscaping ordinance and providing the landscaping along the street frontage? It's,
Plenty of grass along there.
Yeah, I'm thinking if
Vines.
it's, is there a structure that they're operating out of the business, or is it just like a storage yard?
Yeah.
Anything behind it.
We're getting off agenda, but
Yeah.
that's still being dealt with. Very difficult,
Right.
but it is being dealt
Yeah.
with. If you want, give me a meeting, and I can update your orders.
There being some.
I will do that.
I'm gonna write something up tonight.
So Justin, do we need an ordinance for commercial?
I'm sorry.
Do we need to add something to support?
Justin, go to the next slide. So that's today's ordinance, and this is a proposed ordinance. And so this is item 1, talking about single and two-family dwellings. This heading is now scratched out, where it's just fence and wall regulations, and it doesn't say for single and two-family dwellings. And so we have item, subsection 1 and subsection 2. Subsection 2 would capture all other land uses and vacant properties.
Okay.
So we have a fence standard for single and two-family dwellings, and then a fence standard for all other land uses and vacant properties. And I'm trying to remember what the difference is. I have to report back as far as what is the difference. It may have been structured that way just to provide the structure, so if you wanted to have two different fence standards, then that could be done with this fence structure. Because typically you do have two different standards for single family and two-family residential, and then all the land uses, multifamily, churches, many warehouses. A lot of those can have different fence standards. So it's not a, this is a living document. We're not necessarily solving all potential
What ifs?
challenges and what ifs, but it's providing the structure for future amendments that could easily be made to the ordinance. I think this is my last slide. Is there more, Stephanie? No, okay. Yeah, so with this discussion is, the council wanting to give direction to have another discussion, and if so, what would the topics want to focus on? Or are we ready to look at scheduling this for a public hearing to be considered for adoption, and then we would have the opportunity to have input from the public. Of course, there's not individual notices that would be delivered to each property owner in the city, but we would advertise it on the agenda, on the social media, on the front door of City Hall, and however else council would like it to be advertised. But to meet the legal requirements for advertising, right now we would just be doing the bare minimum. We're not looking at changing the zoning map or taking away uses from any zoning district or any entitlements to any property owner. And if we were, then we would have to be giving notices to not only that property owner, but all property owners within 200 feet of any impacted property in regards to allowed land use entitlements. But as it is drafted right now, we would not be, and so we would not be giving a direct mail notice to any individual property owners.
This is just for residents to read, right? Is that what we're getting at?
Well, this will be a change in the, in
Ordinance.
the zone,
Yeah.
in the ordinance, which will just be published. So you may or may not get people in here.
And the agenda item staff report would explain how the proposed ordinance would be consistent with the comprehensive plan, if it isn't already.
So I'm good with all this. My question is with some of the stuff we've talked tonight about the special criteria, and then can we just see prior to, for me, before I say, yeah, let's go ahead and publish this, can we get a final read, just kind of a, here's what we will be publishing, one more scene in each ag.
I think what he's asking though is can we go ahead and do the publish while still revising? We can do that, correct?
Yes, and do you have a meeting next week?
Because a good discussion can occur.
I
from
could
there.
provide the.
So this isn't the final.
Right, this isn't the final.
I'm good with
This is
that.
a
I can
second,
provide
third
a
one.
But provided in that
discussion
meeting, Justin, that we get clarity on these fine points that we have talked about with
Agreed.
special uses or exemptions,
Surely.
Okay.
the whole ZBA
The bubbles?
write-up,
Section?
fencing,
Okay.
and then highlight that to us.
Okay.
I don't wanna do that next week's meeting, cause we
Okay.
already got it
I was in
full
agenda.
plate.
Okay.
They're not gonna wanna be here until 2
2 p.m.
AM.
Be here till 10.
Okay, so ZBA
Brings us
front
up
yard
ordinance
fencing.
back, we may be.
City budget meeting. Oh, yeah. 6 o'clock.
Oh no, my tea time.
So the next regularly scheduled city council meeting would be June 7th. Unless the city council wanted to have a special meeting prior to that.
7th is good.
Okay. And then at the earliest, we would be looking at the first meeting in July, which would be July 5th, for potential public hearing and consideration of adoption. Just because it's scheduled for public hearing and on your agenda, doesn't mean it's a
Done document.
administrative, ministerial approval. It's still to be discussed, it's still to be deliberated. You potentially get input from the community, and things could be even changed with a motion of approval. The agenda item could be tabled, public hearing could be continued, so there's just scheduling for a public hearing doesn't necessarily mean it will be approved that date. So, but it is progressing the ordinance to an end until we start this over.
But it's been so fun.
Okay. Item 19, discussion, City of Robinson Animal Ordinance. Mr. Stivner asked to discuss this at our last meeting. I'll let him open up.
Well, and I apologize, I thought, for mine at least, I'm assuming the others do. What I'm interested in, and sorry once again if I didn't communicate properly, I'd like to see what our ordinance is, what options are, because we have this situation on Moonlight that I don't think is appropriate in whatever way, with the 2 horses in front, and every time I seem to drive by there's a new subsection fence with new animals that are so close to that house, so close to the road. I need Justin or Craig bring me information of what options are out there so that we as a council can determine whether or not we need to add to our ordinances, adjust our ordinances, whatever that may be.
It's not
I
enough
think that
land for
particular
livestock.
property's being, there's some issues with how close animals are to another dwelling as well, right? Or another property.
Well, I think they got that resolved.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not enough
they want
land.
Our current ordinance just says 600 square foot per animal.
But I don't think that's like humane.
Right, that's why I'd
Yeah,
like
that's
to-
what, I agree. We need the existing, we need to see, well, probably some good proposals from other areas, some good ideas, and
And once again, my apologies. That's what I had meant by comment last week or last month.
We're all kind of piled up right now.
Okay.
So there's two different sections of our code of ordinances that are applicable. One would be our zoning ordinance, where we have the land use of farm, ranch, garden, or orchard as a permitted use in agricultural district, real estate district, SF1 district, and SF2 district. And the other section would be our animal chapter of our city code, which I would defer to the animal control officer, because he's the one that enforces it. However, we work together in regards to processing the variances to that ordinance in regards to livestock distances, because that goes to the P&Z that makes a recommendation to city council. And I'm more accustomed and familiar with that process than the animal control officer. But everything else out of the animal control ordinance would be animal control officers. If I had the time, I wouldn't mind working on an amendment to the animal control ordinance, but
I mean, I think we can research what we think is
The plate's kinda
doable
full,
for
huh?
livestock and what other,
I mean,
what other cities do and
Yeah,
what
also
their.
Our current ordinance of livestock is real, like it's 600 square foot per animal, and also the 200 foot distance requirement.
It's just not-
However, the ordinance says that if code enforcement notifies or not code enforcement, or animal control notifies a resident of the 200 foot violation, they have to also advise them that they have the right to apply for a variance. And everyone within 200 foot has to be notified, and then they go to P&Z. If P&Z grants the variance, then they don't have to go to council. If P&Z denies the variance, then they can come to council for the variance. So basically, it says we have to tell them they're in violation, but then tell them how to get around it. So that's the current animal ordinance. It's not real favorable to enforce the livestock. Most cities have ordinances that require zoning, agricultural zoning for livestock, and they require amount of acreage.
That's what.
Typically for horses, cows, things like that, half acre for first animal, 1 acre for each additional.
And I like what you're saying. I'm just needing to
I know, it's just
get the ball rolling and do
Yeah,
that.
it's just with-
Chief, can we get that by July? July.
You guys aren't doing
That's 2
anything.
months.
No, we're not doing anything at all right
Yeah.
now. I could probably definitely get you some other ordinances that are out there to see if we can kind of kick around by the next week.
Yeah, that's June. So in July, we can actually act on something. Yes, we can. We can rearrange what we're doing.
We can put the rate study aside, or put the AMI
Those aren't
implementation,
important.
or the budget, or.
The horses.
I mean, that's, the
They're
problem is everything
hungry.
is kind of coming to a head right now.
I mean, you got a day stretcher. Put more hours in your day.
Yeah.
Oh, we got you the budget software. I thought you were like freed up with time now.
I just have to build it
Yeah,
the
you
first
have all
time.
that free time on your hands.
Ridiculous.
Now, I can have for you next year's budget time.
Would Carl be the one to be able to put that together? No?
Carl catches dogs. My dog.
So that's lying on you?
Gotcha. We can get something to you.
Just cut out one workout and you can find it.
Yeah, Lieutenant.
Don't row that morning.
Starting point by then for sure to give us a direction on that. I'm not confident I can get you like a great polished
Sure.
final product by then, but I can get us some stuff to kick around. I think that's what.
Get us some stuff to kick around and we
Kind
can
of what you're asking
help
for,
polish
say,
it.
hey, these are some options some other cities have.
Just a nice PowerPoint.
On the animal control side. I'm a big fan of PowerPoint, I'll talk to you for a few minutes. And, we'll see what we can do.
Thank you.
I can commit to that.
Thank you.
Confident.
Square you away? Yes, sir.
Any other discussion on the animal ordinance? Then we will move to item 20, which is Mrs. McLean's City of Robinson tornado sirens.
That was
Discussion.
brought up by, I don't know, a couple meetings ago. Resident said something about our tornado sirens. It was, yeah.
Dad, you wanna give an overview of where we are on?
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
God, I have to talk to you.
we just upgraded our entire dispatch center, which we found some issues with triggering. When we were going through the process of upgrading our dispatch center, which I'd love you guys to stop by and see the difference, what it was, what it is now. We found that one of the sirens, the one on Tinsley, wasn't working properly. So the reason not working is that we were able to get somebody out, and the batteries that power it are dead. So what happens with these sirens are there's a motor that starts it, but the motor's not powerful enough to keep it going. So the motor kind of gets it going, then it runs off the batteries, and then the motor charges the batteries back up. So the one on Tinsley that's not working is very, very old. We've had Motorola track some batteries down for it. They're on order. We think they'll be here next week, and they'll come out and get those batteries working. And then once it works, then we're going to work on making sure that our new dispatch software, which is all digital console-based stuff, can convert a digital signal to an analog signal to get it to the two sirens that we have. And then while the Motorola folks are here getting that siren fixed, they're also going to do a study for us to see, based on the geography of the city, where and if we should put any more tornado sirens at the time, and then we'll come back, or I'll either myself or Craig come back to council, say, hey, here's the cost to add more sirens, 2 more sirens, whatever the case is. So
This is Bearcom doing it, right?
Yeah.
So they'll probably still, we did this a couple of years ago, and then the company, I don't know if they went under or what happened, but they gave us a proposal when Pacifica was here, and we got ready to go forward with it, and then they were gone.
Yeah, so
Same company?
No, it was a different company. And so
Bearcom's
we've had to do
big.
research to find companies that do this.
So we're pretty fortunate. So what Bearcom does is they actually do a lot of these sirens, but they don't do them in cities anymore. They do a lot of them for the oil and gas. So they're in Houston all the time. When those things have something, they have to have sirens go off, let the workers know that they need to get out of there. So they were familiar with all the stuff that we had. They even, I talked to them way more about sirens than I ever need to know about sirens again. So these guys
You're a
definitely-
specialist?
I talk to a specialist. These guys definitely know what they're doing. So I'm confident they can get it working. We just have to first get it operational and then get the signal to it.
How long was the battery down for? Is that something that we
We
check
test them
annually?
once a month, so
Oh, not long?
not yet.
Okay.
Something went
Not
down
long.
from the time it had been tested previously.
Yeah.
But most, it's getting harder and harder to find siren companies because most cities are getting away from having sirens.
Because
Between
sending
phones
text messages.
and the reverse 911 calling
Mhm.
systems and things like that, typically they're more efficient in notifying people. Experience has been, and this goes back to when I was in a law enforcement, and he's still, when you set the sirens off, everybody calls the police station and wants to know why the sirens are going off. This last storm we had, March, we had that storm come through.
And
You
that's when we
contacted
got-
me about, we were discussing setting the sirens off. Both my phones went off and told me there's a tornado in your area, take cover. About 2 minutes later, Everbridge called our house phone and my cell phone and said, there's a tornado in your area, take cover. And about that time, we got on the phone saying, set the sirens off.
Yeah,
So
and that's when
we
we
were
learned
getting
the
notifications
Tinsley siren.
personally before
That's when I learned
we
I
even
couldn't
got
hear
the
him. So I was like,
information.
bird? Do I hear this?
So it,
Mhm.
but it's,
I
Oh, yeah,
never.
you sign up for
did,
Oh,
yeah, you
yeah,
have to
probably
turn
marked
on
as
emergency
spam.
alerts on your phone. There's a place in your
Well,
settings where you can turn
Oh,
on the
yeah,
Amber
they're
Alerts
on
and
the
emergency
app.
Clinton
alerts.
County has a sign up too that you can get on.
And then we have on our web, it's on our
Yeah.
website, right?
Robinson's website. too.
Yeah, on our
Yeah.
website, you can go on there and sign up to
Mhm.
Everbridge.
And
and
it's
they'll-
posted frequently on social media.
Hey, I'm doing good if I do my yearly training.
Sleep, right?
Yeah, you guys gotta learn
on our
not to
digital
get
board.
passwords out.
Yes,
But,
tornado,
so
take
we'll have
cover.
a proposal from Bearcom for additional signers, but we'll
Yeah, I
have a
think
few
that's-
that we currently own, should be functional. Fingers crossed everything comes in by the end of the month is the goal.
So when is Bearcom gonna do their?
So they're gonna, they should, they're guessing the batteries should be in by the middle of next week. And once the batteries are in, they're gonna come. So
And that's when they'll do their assessment.
Correct.
If we
They're
need
gonna, they're gonna do it
additional.
all at once, so they're not coming down here multiple times. So they just spent the last week here getting our communication center fixed while they were here. They took care of some of the bugs then, but they couldn't totally finish it until they get that other siren to actually work to make sure that the signal is
Well, the
getting.
assessment should be something that's done with software and mapping
Yeah.
anyway. They're gonna identify how
Mhm.
far each siren reaches and where to locate them and hit all the populated areas.
They're bringing those guys. There's someone else that does the assessment that's coming with them, with the tech and the salesman when they come to fix the battery. So there's gonna be several guys here at the time. So we're weeks away from having working sirens. Hopefully, I don't want to commit to that because it's out of my control. And then we're a few weeks away from that, having an assessment to see if we need more sirens and what that cost would be. So
I like it.
the ball's rolling. Is just getting stuff right now.
I think I've been asking for this since what, 2008?
Like I said, it's getting harder and
Just
harder
so
to
we
find
laugh.
companies that do sirens. Just plain sirens. Now, there are some that they have systems with Doppler radar and all this kind of stuff that up in Oklahoma, places like that where there's loudspeakers stationed around the communities that'll come on and
Play music.
but you're talking about millions of dollars too, so.
Okay. Any more discussion on tornado sirens?
I feel very satisfied.
Good. All right, last discussion is Mr. Burke's Peplo Park parking lot.
Yes, so this one was brought up by Dale Patillo several months ago. I believe last I heard about it, it was something to put on budget review. So looking forward to seeing what we can discuss on it in conversations. So I believe his proposal was just extending it going towards Brookshire's. I know currently the parking lot is pretty narrow anyways. I mean, you can barely get,
Back out of it.
yeah, you can
without
barely
getting
back
in
out of
the
it
grass.
if both sides are full. So, and I mean, the community, I mean, that park draws a lot of attention. So every time I drive by it, I mean, there's people there. So I just think the extended parking is a benefit to us. So,
I would never park in the grass. But if I.
or if I
That's the
was
police do that.
Yeah, no, I've never
So,
done that.
The original vision was the same distance where the stone and the flag is.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
because you're running
Same
that.
distance on the other side would be another drive approach, and there'd be parking there. Now, it was proposed in fiscal year 18-19, it was estimated at $65,000 to finish it. Based on where we are
Triple
now,
that.
that's probably gonna be about
Quadruple that.
$150,000 to build it now.
Concrete went from 92 to 128, June 1.
Well, and that was from where it went from 18,
Yeah, but
19 to
There wasn't that big of a
2000.
difference between then and now, though. There's a big difference
But yeah,
today,
it's-
or there will be June 1.
Yeah, it's, so, I mean, we'll have to get it, also because the cost of getting up there will have to be designed. And we'll have to get it designed. Yeah, any public improvement over $20,000 technically is supposed to be designed by, and sealed by PE.
I feel like I could design it, just like,
I thought past statutes
Rectangle.
$19,000 increments.
I'll send you the statute that covers that. And then it has to be bid, so we will have to.
I mean, it does have interest. I mean, if not now, then I mean, what's feeder? I mean, everything's gonna continue to go up.
Yeah, it's something we need to do, and it's
Mhm.
just, I think the last time we even had it proposed, we had somebody show up in opposition to it though, so.
As always.
of course.
Is there any grants on that since it's?
Oh, yeah, since it's a park.
Yes. It was the 18-19 budget, and it proposed $65,000.
Continue it out the other
Can
side.
we get the list on it?
May 16th.
16.
Maybe some contractors will donate.
I will park.
You know, maybe
Yeah,
get
my
to
contract's up in
cost.
August.
Not having it.
That's your lady.
Mhm. On purpose, yeah. January.
Anything else on the Peplo parking lot?
You said no grants, Chris?
I'm not aware of any grants that would cover anything like that.
So on this, we already have the drawings or whatnot that we need to put out for bid? We do not have anything.
Nope.
It has to be drawn,
It has to be sealed.
sealed.
It has to be done by a professional engineer.
Jesus God, that costs $10,000
It's
to
state
engineer
law.
a damn parking lot. There's your $1,000 toilet. $10,000 toilet.
Have a
Talk
GoFundMe.
to the folks in.
Can we have a
Austin that wants to pass
GoFundMe
the
on,
laws.
for the city of Robinson
I feel like-
people to donate to the park? To extend it?
You could get a donation.
From like
I
Petrol.
mean, put it out there.
Look at the
Can we,
sign that's out front.
can we put it out there as a city?
With my
that-
hands.
I think that's a great idea. I like that. I mean,
Were you out there?
Bert, nobody saw you do it. It didn't happen.
Oh, I did.
I think people donate if you gave them reserved parking spaces.
Oh,
I think you need to change the
I
parking
would.
spaces to
I totally would.
angled.
It needs to be
Well,
angled,
that's
yeah,
what
for
we
sure.
would do is we would have it in, it would be one way in, one way out. The parking spaces would be angled. That's the way it really needs to be designed. But the way it was built, you really couldn't do that since only one little part of it was built. It would have been really good to do the whole thing when the park was built. Probably would have cost
Way
Yeah.
less.
a whole lot less.
Well, especially,
Anything over X amount has to be stamped.
Anything over $20,000.
Has to be what? Sealed?
Has to be designed by a professional engineer.
Well,
It's a
you know
public
who got
improvement.
that was engineers.
So what if we did it several times, just $19,000?
That's even
each?
just for a parking lot.
That's a BS over
That's for even just a parking lot.
here. Any public improvement with an investment over $20,000, it has to be constructed.
So this is something new for this year, game changer.
It just needs a signature seal, or an engineer seal.
Technically, it's supposed to be designed by an engineer.
Does it have to be the city engineer?
Or would have to be an engineer.
Is it not already designed though, and engineered? Like, was it the plan already not for that?
I don't.
That's a good
We just
question.
reuse it?
One thing I don't like,
That
I
may
can't
already
see
be
what it
drawn.
is.
Write that
I
down.
don't like that, so we should see what it is.
Wasn't that
Chance
long
that may
ago?
already be done.
You know where the plans are for Peplo Park?
She's like, oh yeah, right behind
Didn't
you.
you tell David that they were in Dale's desk?
There was a folder in Dale's desk with, had a whole bunch of grant information and stuff, but I've never actually seen it.
Contact
There was
Dale.
definitely drawings for that.
Contact Dale. He may know. He may
There
have
were
a copy
definitely
of it.
drawings.
Dale may have a copy of it.
'Cause we had to bid
Some
that
of
and
them
we,
are
and we
in
revised
plans
it.
are for the park.
Because at one point, there was a library on it.
What? What'd you
You
say?
know what year
The
that
park
was?
committee had a library on it. That got moved.
16?
Oh, yeah.
Did you say 2016?
Well, that's way before then.
No, it was before that. I came here in 2016. The park was already here.
No, I thought you said there was already another.
When do you think those plans
I
were?
was on the
No,
park committee. I
it was
even on
proposed in the
council. I was
budget.
over 18, 19
In
years.
2018-19 at 65,000, which would have included any cost for designing it.
So
That was just an
So if you
estimate.
look on the park sign, I think
But we
there's a
didn't
date.
design it.
Oh,
was
When that
proposal.
sign went up. And so those
You
plans were
hand-painted it.
probably 2 years before that sign, maybe 3.
You voted on it, when was it?
He didn't vote. Yeah. No, and neither one of us did.
No. Really?
I think I may
Yeah,
have
I was
stood
on
in
the
high
park
school.
committee.
Okay, well, somebody's gonna have to
And
drive
part of
by
that was
tomorrow.
the Parks and Wildlife grant, which was a really little park and wildlife.
There was a park and
But
wildlife.
it was really small. It was like $50,000.
That's a lot of money in there.
What's happening?
We built one in Angel.
Hey, look at there.
Look at her, look at her go.
$500,000 person.
You
There,
are?
what
No,
we
it's
got?
not.
There's the,
500,000
yeah,
community
there you go.
members.
RBDR. They wouldn't,
Does it have a date on it?
June 2010?
That's when we moved here.
2010.
Where's the parking lot?
That's just the concept, the conceptual drawing. That's from RBDR. They're the architect, not the engineer. You don't think it was in, nothing was? It was just on concept? Then I bet you RBDR probably gave the drawings to us too.
Well, the city, it was all done on it was all done through donations and everything, right? So technically, there were no public
It
funds
wasn't all
expended.
out, but
So
it
then if
was-
we can get it,
Yeah. We did in-kind match.
Right.
so maybe can the same route go for the parking lot, so then you don't have to have an engineer involved if it was done by grants and
I can tell you
donations.
from experience, Parks and Wildlife does not pay for restrooms or parking lots.
Could have nominated Brittany
Donations.
McLean as the park.
We have Wade run a list for our heavy hitters in town. I go,
Donation committee
hey,
chairman.
I see how much you make annually. You donate to it. Come on.
15 grand.
Park committee chairman.
Oh, listen, I'm already on roll.
And you got 10 votes.
Lucas.
Yeah, and I have 10. I'm pretty big deal. It's getting really close between me and Moody. Had nobody.
One person voted, so.
I swear, if that person wins.
Do you know how many square feet that is needed? Any idea?
It's probably not quite a third of it is there. If you go to full length, then out the other side. It probably would do another, let's see, I think there's 8 spaces plus a handicap spot now. And I think we were looking at the other day, David and I, that probably another 22 spaces.
They're probably gonna require like 5.5 or 6 inches and heavy steel. It's gonna be stamped, but
Steel?
steel is expensive.
Rebar?
Well, it seems to be built pretty well the way it is, because it's built up pretty well for
I don't see cracks or anything in it.
stuff that's been on it, so.
Concrete.
I don't know, police department do concrete work?
Get some caliche.
What is that?
That's the gravel that sticks to your tires and onto your car.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you know,
Where?
we paved all the sidewalks. Since I came here, all the sidewalks were paved. That was the first goal. Because all the sidewalks were originally
Yeah, where'd that money come
decomposed.
from? Budget?
Gravel.
Came from the budget.
Yeah.
We did it
I got an idea, guy.
over 3 years.
Tajin does it?
No, we just
Oh.
get a special exemption.
Oh, yeah. We can.
Get a ZBA, we don't need
Where's
concrete.
They will approve it. They will approve it.
Get a ZBA.
Gravel.
Mhm.
That's what we're
Yeah,
doing.
so all the- Which actually surprised me that Parks and Wildlife was getting money
Took that one.
It's fine.
decompress, for decomposed granite isn't technically a ADA approved surface. Parks are supposed to be ADA compliant if they're
It was hard to roll
Parks and
away.
Wildlife. But it was such a small Parks and Wildlife grant, it might have been exempt from that.
Oh, yeah.
$50,000.
Yeah, I definitely need parking.
I think there was a foundation that gave some foundation here that gave a pretty sizable.
She's tough, she'll handle it.
Young blood, maybe?
Oh, no, she's real tough.
Boy, if it was young blood, that would've been Bill Johnson. What's that?
No, it was.
Somebody
Yeah, it was
did.
some- but it wasn't Youngblood Foundation.
Yeah, young blood gave money.
Yeah, but there was a foundation. There used to be
Oh,
a.
the Clifton Robinson Foundation. It was Clifton Robinson. Oddly enough. Because I was like, I didn't understand why they were.
There was a picture.
We gotta get the Chip and Joanna
Find that old
Foundation.
picture.
Yeah, we need to have a fundraiser.
There was an old picture used to hang
Nice.
on
They
the
did.
bottom in the hallway that had an article, newspaper article, that talked about who gave the donation and stuff. See if we, that picture shows.
Oh, Destiny, scroll in on
I think it was
that.
Clifton Robinson.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow, that's different.
There's a card.
What is that, a water? Yeah.
The library on there.
I don't care for the flyover.
We'll put something in the budget. It's just money.
That's what I always say.
I mean, taxes went up, right?
Yeah, I mean, no big deal.
Yeah.
Add it to my water
You know,
bill.
when I came here, I was thinking, give me $100 million, I can fix everything here. Now it's $170 million.
Damn. Inflation.
The way the prices are going.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Okay. Any other discussion on the parking lot? All right, item 22, updates, requests for, and items to be placed on future agendas. Anything?
Mm-mm.
Nope. Mr. Rogers?
I have none.
Adjourning at 9:19.
This is earlier than I thought it'd be. Oh, God. Give them tomorrow for breakfast.
That's awesome.
No for it.
How many Starbursts did I eat?
I think the whole bag.
Oh my god.
Maybe a little bit over a dozen.
It was a lot. It was a king size. It was shareable. And I did not share it. Did Jeremy put it? Jeremy?